5 million later, the central United States becomes a cold, sandy and rocky desert. The North American continent is covered by an ice sheet that ends just south of the border between what were once the United States and Canada, to where the human city of Chicago once stood. The central region of North America is cold and dry. The atmospheric temperature is so low that the air has little capacity for holding moisture. What was once the most productive agricultural land on the planet is now little more than a vast, barren dust bowl. Along the eastern edge of the continent, the Atlantic Ocean has receded, leaving a broad coastal plain topped by the Appalachian Mountains. Inland, there is an unending expanse of cold sand and cracked rock. The North American desert is as bitterly cold as the Gobi Desert was in East Asia. It stretches for about 2,400 kilometers until it finally fetches up against the rocky barrier formed by the glacier-ridden Rocky Mountains away to the west. All year long, piercing winds moving 100 kilometers an hour sweep southwards from the ice, stirring up vicious sandstorms and scouring away any potentially productive pockets of soil. Occasionally, winds howl in from the coastal regions, but very little rain reaches the interior. What precipitation there is tends to be snow, but even this falls infrequently. Any snow cover on higher ground is thin and patchy. There is a significant difference in temperature between the equator and the edge of the ice cap, producing a steep temperature gradient from north to south. This leads to unstable conditions with screaming tornadoes ripping across the interior far more frequently than they did during previous times. Vegetation is sparse in this harsh, arid landscape. Only the hardiest of plants exist, but in small numbers. Indeed, very little life can survive above ground. Those animals able to live in this bleak desert must withstand freezing temperatures and protect themselves from the violent storms. The animal inhabitants of the North American desert are supreme specialists, brilliantly adapted to cope with the specific demands of an uncompromising habitat. Some species have adapted physically, whilst others have altered their living environment. Animals that live here need to last out times when food is in short supply. In order to do so, they have developed remarkable strategies for storing energy and conserving food. Some animals have even developed altruistic feeding habits, sharing food with other colony members to ensure the survival of the species as a whole. Death gleaners can be seen hanging in the air, resting on updrafts of wind blown off the sandy ridges below. They circle like vultures, seeking an easy meal on the ground. Now and again, one wheels and banks, signaling to the others that it has found something. Soon, a large group will gather and prepare to feast. The deathgleaner is a species of giant, social, diurnal bat native to the North American desert and Rocky Mountains of 5 million AD. With a wingspan of about 1.3 meters and a body weight of roughly 600 grams, it is the largest known carnivorous bat in history, and of all bats, only some frugivorous human-era megabats were larger. Its mouth alone is about 3 centimeters long, and its teeth are 1/8 of 3 millimeters long. As the cold desert spread across North America, the deathgleaner's forest-dwelling ancestor evolved to become larger and more social in order to cover more ground in its search for prey. As the bitterly cold conditions of the 5 million AD Ice Age spread across North America, bats were able to occupy the niches left over by numerous species of hawks and vultures, which had experienced huge declines in biodiversity. The deathgleaner has become diurnal in order to avoid the freezing temperatures of the desert night. In terms of overall appearance and wing structure, the deathgleaner hasn't evolved much from its forest-dwelling ancestors. The deathgleaner is much larger than most extant bats. Though compared to most present bats, the deathgleaner is relatively skinny. Deathgleaners will avoid excessive heat loss by cooling the blood before it passes through the systematic veins. Any heat taken from the blood entering the wing membrane is used to warm the blood returning from the wings. Another factor which allows bats to survive was being able to go into torpor, an involuntary state of physical and mental activity similar to hibernation. These efficient strategies for regulating body temperature alone have allowed bats to survive and thrive in an environment, whilst numerous species of mammals and birds have gone extinct. The deathgleaner has become diurnal in order to avoid the freezing temperatures of the desert night. At nightfall, deathgleaners will return to their roosts, huddling together in large groups to conserve heat. Any leftover scraps from attacks are returned and shared with uneaten members of the bat colony. Sharing food not only aids the survival of certain individuals but of the entire species. An important prey item for the deathcleaner is the spink, a subterranean flightless bird which lives in underground colonies. As skinks are usually inaccessible to deathcleaners in their burrows, the bats have two main hunting strategies. The first is to follow a North American rattleback or look out for one digging, as rattlebacks frequently dig up desert turnips from skink burrows, scattering the birds on the surface and exposing them to deathcleaners. Alternatively, recently matured skinks gather on the desert surface during the night to mate, so deathcleaners which hunt in the early hours of dawn may find some stragglers still exposed. Although deathcleaners may hunt lost baby rattlebacks, their armor is tough and unpalatable, and the bats will not attack a large adult. Rattlebacks can make themselves seem larger and more frightening by shaking their scales, the sharp edges of which could easily tear a deathcleaner's delicate wings. South American rattlebacks were highly successful on the dry grasslands that were spreading across the Amazon basin, so much so, in fact, that they were able to migrate northwards into the North American desert. There, the rattleback evolved into yet another species, one adapted for the cold desert environment. The North American rattleback or desert rattleback is a species of rattleback, an armored rodent, native to the North American desert of 5 million AD. It is a descendant of the South American rattleback. The South American rattleback managed to expand its range with several individuals crossing the Amazon basin, before migrating towards North America. As desert conditions are much different from roaming through an open savanna, the rattleback has undergone numerous physical alterations in order to withstand the harsh desert conditions of the American Midwest. The desert rattleback is less heavily built than its grassland cousin, provided the absence of large predators. Compact, closely linked. Scales provide the perfect defense against sandstorms, while the addition of thick hair shields the rattleback's face. The North American rattleback's ears and lips are less visible, as increased exposure to cold air can potentially lead to frostbite. Desert rattlebacks will provide both care and protection toward their young and must cover larger distances in search of food sources. Being an intelligent animal, the rattleback relies on its sense of smell to locate and unearth desert turnips, the rattleback's preferred source of water. Desert rattlebacks must cover large distances to locate desert turnips, as in the desert very little if any water is located. While digging for turnips, the rattleback may accidentally expose a burrowing skink. While the rattlebacks tolerate the skinks, unearthed the unfortunate animals are left vulnerable to predation to predators such as the deathcleaner. With the end of the Ice Age, the world warms up and many of the animals that had adapted to the bitterly cold conditions of the Ice Age are unable to keep up with these rapid changes to their habitat and climate. The skink's wings have evolved into strong, spade-like forelimbs for digging tunnels deep below the desert. Thespink is a species of eusocial flightless subterranean galliform bird, about 8 cm long, endemic to the North American desert. The skink is descended from a species of quail, which are already ground-dwelling in the human era. The skink lost its ability to fly and became smaller and sleeker in order to become a burrowing animal, allowing it to survive in the harsh environment of the North American desert. Its wings have adapted into shovel-like appendages with hardened feathers. The skink's body plan is very different to that of a regular bird, as they are entirely quadrupedal, moving with a crawling, shuffling gait. The feathers of each wing have become horny scales better suited for digging, and the wings themselves are capable of independent movement in order to shovel earth. The skink crawls in much the same way as it digs, levering itself forward with its elbows, its weight supported by horny pads at the joints. The skink's beak, which can also be used for digging, is heavily flattened and is surrounded by a fringe of sensitive hairs which allow the nearly blind skink to better detect its immediate surroundings. Their feathers range in color from dark brownish-gray to white, and they are patterned with dark, sometimes black, stripes and patches along their sides and faces. Like most birds, they appear to be sexually dimorphic, with males having brighter white bodies and darker, more defined markings as well as an extra stripe on the throat. Skinks, despite being drastically different from their ancestors, have similar breeding habits. Like other galliform birds, it has a lek breeding system located in a single area. The males sing and try to gather the attention of females. The lek eventually ends when the sun comes up and they get back to work, digging and finding food as usual. Skinks principally feed on the sugar-rich sap of desert turnips, which is also the favored food item of the North American rattleback. Spink burrow systems are based around areas where this turnip is abundant, but their tunnels are frequently dug out or otherwise disturbed by rattlebacks searching for turnips, which they sometimes find by seeing spinks kicking sand out of their burrows. Spinks are preyed on by death gleaners, giant bats, which find them by following rattlebacks and waiting for them to disturb the spinks and scare them out onto the surface, or by hunting on the spinks' mating grounds at first light. With the end of the Ice Age, the world warms up and many of the animals that had adapted to the bitterly cold conditions of the Ice Age are unable to keep up with these rapid changes to their habitat and climate. The fauna of the desert's North American rattlebacks, spinks, and death gleaners go extinct. The North European ice is a tundra that has now dominated much of Europe, 5 million AD, making the orchards and vineyards long gone. The world is deep in a period of glaciation. 5 million AD, the planet is once again dominated by ice caps, as it was in the Pleistocene epoch, 2 million BC. So much water is locked up in the ice caps that global sea levels are nearly about 150 meters lower than they were during the Holocene. Ice sheets over a kilometer thick cover most of North America and the whole of Scandinavia, reaching down into northern Europe. Where once the craggy coastline of southwest Great Britain boasted semi-tropical plants which flourished in coves warmed by the Gulf Stream, there is now blizzard-swept tundra. The continental shelf which spreads out from the British Isles and France is an exposed, frozen plain of sand and gravel deposits and frozen soil. On a winter's night, temperatures fall below -60 degrees Celsius and wind chill makes it feel even colder. Come the brief summer, conditions improve a little. The edge of the ice cap lies sparkling to the north, its meltwater running in gravel-choked streams across the flat tundra. Water collects everywhere in lakes and ponds, unable to drain away through the permanently frozen subsoil, or permafrost. Rocks lie in polygonal patterns, covering broad expanses of land. The bitter, boulder-cracking frosts of winter have heaved one up from the soil in successive freeze-thaw cycles and rolled them together in curving lines. Dome-shaped mounds, called pingos, rise up from the tundra, formed around a core of ice. A pingo occurs where deeper water has sprung through the permafrost or in sites where lakes have progressively frozen from the sides towards the center. Despite the harsh cycle of fierce winters and brief summers, there is life here. The permafrost does not favor deep roots, but certain forms of flora are tough enough to eke out an existence from the frozen soil. Clusters of cotton grass border the lakes, undulating meadows of small, hardy lichens and grasses cover the raised land between the gravel deposits and stream beds. Tight clumps of heather form a rooting site for many varieties of small flowering plants, the only plants which might be considered. Trees are closer to shrubs, and even these hug the ground. Species of willow send their gnarled trunks horizontally and spread their branches across the earth, as if unwilling to raise their heads into the bitter winds that will inevitably come with winter. When spring arrives in northern Europe, water from melting ice runs in narrow, muddy torrents between the banks of shingle that choke the riverbed. The thaw softens the surface soil and turns large areas of the tundra into marsh, dotted with pools. Because of the climate conditions, the fly life cycle is accelerated. They mate and reproduce in an incredibly short period of time during the brief thaw. Migrant birds wheel in and out of the swarms, making the best of the bonanza. Migrant birds fare particularly well here. They weather out the winters in less extreme regions further south and travel to these bleak lands in the fleeting summer months to take advantage of the quick and intense growth cycle of the flies. The spring sun will slant through the clouds of insects, illuminating the reddish fireweed, the yellow, powdery male flowers of the low willows and the white heather bells. All these plants grow in shallow pockets of soil, in contrast to the orange and yellow lichens that coat the frost-shattered rocks. Shagrets are the largest mammals in the northern European region. Their layered coats protect them from the cold climate of the northern tundra. The The shagrat is a species of herd-living, sheep-sized rodent native to the North European ice of 5 million AD, ranging from the ice sheet in the north to the edges of the French coniferous forests in the south. A seasonally migratory animal which subsits mainly on tundra grasses, it is the region's largest terrestrial animal in 5 million AD. The shagrat is descended from the alpine marmot. The shagrat evolved from the alpine marmot, but as far as their basic body plan goes, they have not changed much from their ancestors. They are 3 times larger than marmots as an adaptation against the cold, as larger animals with bigger surface area relative to volume lose less body heat, and have developed typical polar adaptations such as thicker fur and blubber. As marmots are burrowing animals, the shagrat was already well adapted for digging. The shagrat generally resembles its RMOT ancestor, and is also very similar to the South American capybara, the largest modern rodent. It is covered with long, shaggy, dark brown fur all over its body, and is very stocky and thick-set. Its legs are short and stocky, and its ears are small to regulate its internal temperature and prevent heat loss. They retain the large chisel teeth of their ancestors, and have large claws on the feet of their powerful forearms. The shagrat's coat is composed of 2 layers of fur. The dense layer of underfur traps warm air next to the body for insulation, whilst long, waterproof, hollow and air-filled guard hairs keep the underfur dry. This combination heavily insulates the shagrat against the Ice Age winter, and also allows it to briefly enter cold water without being soaked or chilled. Female shagrats give birth in early spring, following a gestation period which lasts throughout the winter. They are resilient against blizzards, and can survive in temperatures as low as -50. Shagrats are social animals which live together in herds of around a dozen animals, centered around a dominant bull male. After the females give birth in the early spring, about a third of a herd will consist of youngsters. In particularly cold weather, members of the herd will huddle together for warmth. If one member of the herd smells danger, it barks a warning and the whole herd leaps to attention. An unsettled herd assembles in an open space and, instinctively, the youngsters huddle in the middle. The adults surround them in a defensive formation, all facing outwards. When a predator is present, the shagrats bunch up even more closely, narrowing their eyes and baring their teeth, hissing in threat. The herds spend the winter at the northern edge of the birch and conifer forests south of the tundra, around the area where the French coast once was. They migrate back to the edge of the ice sheet following the end of the winter, to reach their summer grazing grounds. When searching for food after returning to the open tundra, shagrat herds spread out across meadows and root about, pushing rocks over with their strong forelegs to reveal the soil beneath. The big claws on their forefeet dig into the soil to reach underground grass stems and the roots of heather and willow. They must travel massive distances each day in order to find enough food to sustain themselves. Shagrats feed on various types of tundra grasses and cold-adapted shrubs, and are themselves the principal prey item of the snowstalker. When in groups they are well defended against predators by their numbers and comparatively large size, but animals like the snowstalker can pick off lost, injured, young, or elderly individuals, or use blizzards as cover to ambush herds. Now the shagrats are in real danger. Not from the blizzard, but from a predator, a snowstalker, that uses the snowstorm as a cover, stalking close to the herd. The snowstalker is a large predatory mustelid native to the North European ice of 5 million AD. It is an apex predator which preys on large animals such as shagrats. The snowstalker is descended from the wolverine, the largest of the mustelid, which were already vicious predators in the human era, though they were not apex predators. As a generalist scavenger and predator which would eat anything it could scavenge or kill, the wolverine was able to survive the human era mass extinction and adapt to fill the niches of extinct predators such as wolves and bears. With the coming of the Ice Age, the wolverine evolved further, developing thick, warm, white fur for insulation and for camouflage, as well as hairy soles for a better grip. The snowstalker's evolution of saber teeth is an example of convergent evolution, as the feature had previously evolved in the saber-toothed cats. The snowstalker is the only known example of a true placental mammal other than a feliform evolving saber teeth. As far as its basic physiology goes, the snowstalker has barely changed compared to its ancestor. It is larger and heavier than the wolverine, weighing up to 35 kilograms, and its canines have developed into a pair of saber teeth. It has powerful jaws, with a bite force of 900 kilograms. They are somewhat sexually dimorphic, males are larger than females. The snowstalker's fur is white, providing it with camouflage in blizzards and winter storms, and is thick and warm, insulating it from the cold. The soles of their feet are also covered in hair, to insulate them from the cold of the ground, and to help their grip on slippery ice. When they are not breeding or looking after cubs, snowstalkers are solitary and territorial, but because of the thin populations of prey, the territory of a single snowstalker may cover several square miles. They ferociously defend their kills from any other snowstalkers of the same gender that approach. Female snowstalkers do not hold territory of their own, but wander through the territories of males. They will sometimes allow a dominant male to do hunting for them, conserving their own energy, as males will allow females to eat from their kills in return for mating rights. They make their dens in shallow caves, which is usually the only shelter available on the tundra. Because of the massive distances between territories, snowstalkers mate only infrequently. To prevent inbreeding and genetic weakness, the female snowstalker enters estrus every 21 days, and once she mates, her fertilized eggs are held in suspension inside her. Eventually, after multiple matings, the embryos are implanted into her womb, and as the winter ends and the summer thaw begins, she will give birth to a litter of cubs born of many different fathers. Female snowstalkers take care of their cubs, traveling massive distances to find food for them, and, to teach them to hunt, mothers will chase prey animals back to their den for them to train on. If they struggle too much, the mother will demonstrate by injuring or outright killing the prey. Mothers also regurgitate food for very young cubs. Because big animals are rare on the tundra, snowstalkers will follow their prey for days, and have evolved a cautious hunting strategy. Using its white coat to blend in with the snow, especially during a blizzard, the snowstalker will ambush and injure, but not kill, its chosen prey item. Instead of risking injury by trying to finish the prey off, the snowstalker will simply trail its wounded victim until it bleeds to death. During the summer, when boggy greenery is flourishing, its white coat puts it at a disadvantage, though it may try to camouflage against rocky terrain or patches of snow. Snowstalkers always hunt alone. Snowstalker vocalizations are primarily roars and growls, not too dissimilar to human-era big cats such as tigers or leopards. The snowstalker's main prey item is the shagrat, giant rodents which wander the tundra in herds. When in groups, shagrats are well defended against predators by their numbers, and will bunch up together, bare their teeth, and hiss when they feel threatened, but snowstalkers often pick off lost, injured, young, or elderly individuals. In coastal regions, they may try to attack gannet whales or their eggs, but are often repelled by the long beaks of the gannet whales, or by their special defense. When threatened, gannet whales will regurgitate partially digested fish and squid, which is particularly noxious to the sensitive nose of a predator like the snowstalkers. Even with these defenses, gannet whales usually roost on remote islands, and are therefore only at risk when cold winters create ice bridges. The gannet whale has given up flying completely, so its wings can evolve just for swimming, like flippers on a sea lion or a penguin, so it can travel at high speed underwater. The gannet whale is a species of very large semi-aquatic flightless bird native to the North Sea and the coasts of the North European ice in 5 million AD. Descended from gannets, they fill the niches of animals like small-toothed whales. The gannet whale's ancestor, the northern gannet, was a semi-aquatic flying bird. Gannet whales are descended from the northern gannet. Gannets were unique among seabirds in that, when hunting fish, they dived below water and swims with its wings. This behavior, with its necessary adaptations, perfectly positioned the gannet to take advantage of the extinction of the marine mammals and fill absent niches. Their wings have become shorter, like flippers, and their feet have become rudders. About the size of a male walrus, gannet whales have a very different physiology to their aerial ancestors resembling pinnipeds more than anything else. Although they retain their long beaks, unable to fly, their wings have evolved into stubby paddles similar to fins which help them in swimming. Their feet are used as rudders. Although it may not look like it, the gannet whale still has a covering of feathers which are much denser and shorter than before, streamlining it and making it more aquadynamic. Below these dense feathers is a layer of blubberbath of which insulate it from the intense cold of the icy seas. The gannet whale has a number of specialized adaptations to its marine existence. Its nostrils automatically close up when it dives, preventing it from breathing water, and it has glands above its eyes which secrete excess salt, a mineral the gannet whale frequently ingests due to its diet of fish. Gannet whales are semi-aquatic animals which are ungainly and clumsy on land but swift predators in the water where they can swim at up to 30 km an hour. Steering with their feet, they roost and nest on the land, going into the sea only to hunt, and like their ancestors are social animals roosting in large groups. Gannet whales breed in the summer and lay a single egg, frequently nesting in large groups on remote islands. The egg, which takes a long time to hatch, incubation lasts well into the winter, is protected from the cold by being clutched to the underside of the mother's tail with her feet when the egg hatches. A father fishes for food for the hatchlings in human-era emperor penguins. The young gannet whale also takes a long time to grow into an adult, but they live in tightly knit family groups, and adults are protective of their young and their eggs. Gannet whales hunt various kinds of fish and squid and are completely safe from predators of their own in the sea, although adults are too large and dangerous with beaks capable of delivering serious wounds to be threatened by apex predators such as snowstalkers. When they are in a group, their eggs and young are vulnerable to predators, particularly as time equals 0.2s greater than. Unlike the marine mammals, gannet whales must lay their eggs on the land. To avoid predators, gannet whales nest on islands, but in cold enough winters, ice bridges provide access to predators, decimating gannet whale populations. However, they can also defend themselves by regurgitating partially digested fish and squid, which is too much for the sensitive noses of predators. With the end of the Ice Age, the world warms up and many of the animals that had adapted to the bitterly cold conditions of the Ice Age are unable to keep up with these rapid changes to their habitat and climate. The fauna of the snowy tundra, shagrets, gannet whales, and snowstalkers, go extinct. The gannet whales were criticized more than any other animal of 5 million AD by viewers, who pointed out that 5 million years would not be nearly enough time for gannets to abandon flight and evolve into seal-like birds. Realistically, such drastic evolution would take dozens, if not hundreds of millions of years. The snowstalker is generally regarded as being plausible. However, some viewers have pointed out that if the snowstalker attempted to subdue prey in a similar fashion to saber-toothed cats, the forces to its skull would have been too great. While the shagret is generally regarded as a plausible species, some viewers have pointed out that even following a mass extinction and an ice age, many species of ungulates would be present and there wouldn't be any open niches for the shagret to occupy. In 5 million AD, the once great Amazon rainforest diminishes into the huge Amazon grassland, stretching for 3,000 kilometers across the South American landscape. The great courses of the Amazon River still support any forest at all. The rest of the Amazon basin has been replaced by grassland prairie. Ice caps may dominate the globe in 5 million AD, but, between the equator and the poles, there is still a diverse range of habitats. There are equatorial rainforests, tropical grasslands, tropical deserts, temperate woodlands, coniferous forests and tundra. Over time, these habitats have been compressed into narrower and narrower bands by the cooler climate. During the Holocene, the actions of humans threatened to destroy the equatorial rainforests. 5 million AD, much time after humankind, it has been further depleted by natural changes brought about by the new Ice Age. In the Amazon basin, the forest is reduced to scattered pockets, surrounded by broad stretches of savanna which reach out to the horizon. Rainfall is lower now than it has been for millions of years, and the mighty Amazon River has dwindled. The vast network of tributaries that once made it the most voluminous river in the world have all but dried up. The dry conditions mean that the savanna is frequently swept by bushfires. These can be triggered by lightning strikes from an approaching summer tropical thunderstorm or a glint of sunlight. Once ignited, the periodic fires can sweep across hundreds of square miles at great speeds, destroying everything in their path. In the Amazon grassland, life has adapted to drought and fire in surprising ways. The grasses rely on the fires to clear the ground of other competing plant species, such as trees. If left to grow unchecked, trees can dominate the land, cutting out the sun with their thick canopies and monopolizing the soil with their roots. Grasses, on the other hand, are fast-growing plants and easily replace their burnt leaves with new growth from underground stems. They disperse their seeds when the fire has passed, and thrive in the dry habitat. In the wet season, though, fires are less frequent. The Amazon rainforest that once occupied this region was far more productive than the Amazon grassland, but when the forests in this part of the world declined, so too did the number and diversity of animal species, because South America is connected to the rest of the world only by the narrow strip of the Panama Isthmus, a connection which is periodically broken by changing sea levels and volcanic activity. Animal life has developed in the savanna in virtual isolation, cut off from the rest of the world and faced with drastic environmental changes. Those species which survived extinction have evolved new adaptations for life in this ecosystem. The animals here have lost the shelter of most trees and are now primarily exposed to wind and fire. Where once food was plentiful, animals must now cover great distances to find it. Armored plates of thick stiff hair make rattlebacks durable creatures able to withstand bushfires and defend themselves from angry caterpillars. The South American rattleback grassland rattleback, or simply rattleback, is a species of rattleback, an armored rodent native to the Amazon grassland of 5 million AD. The rattlebacks evolved from a South American rodent called the paca when the Amazon rainforest disappeared, replaced by an open grassland. These rodents could no longer rely on the cover of the jungle to survive, and so evolved heavy armor and spines for defense to face the challenges presented by that of an open environment. The South American rattleback has a North American cousin which migrated north and adapted to live in desert conditions. The South American rattleback is about the size of an otter. Its back is covered by movable plates which are composed of hardened matted hair like the armor of a pangolin or the horns of a rhinoceros. These plates are strong enough to withstand repeated blows from a caterpillar and are also somewhat fireproof, allowing the rattleback to survive the bush fires which are common on the Amazon prairie and which the rattleback is too slow and heavy to escape. Additionally, its eyelids are covered in a protective layer of hardened skin to protect its eyes from the heat of fires. The rattleback has smaller and movable scales on its head as well as the plates. 0.2s greater than. It also has a fringe of long, hard, sharp spines or quills on either side of its body, just below the edge of its plates, as well as on the crown of its head. The rattleback is broadly omnivorous, mainly eating grass stems, roots, and tubers, but it will also feed on carrion and the eggs of birds and reptiles. It is a solitary, highly territorial animal which only comes together to mate and does not otherwise tolerate other rattlebacks. When two individuals meet, they engage in displays, rattling their plates to make noise. The louder rattleback is the winner. When it is attacked, the rattleback is able to use the fringe of spines along its sides to hunker itself down into the earth, making it almost impossible to dislodge and protecting its vulnerable underside. The rattleback's taste for eggs brings it into conflict with animals such as caterpillars, communal nesters who defend their eggs. However, caterpillars are usually unable to kill rattlebacks on account of their armor. Like caterpillars, rattlebacks will scavenge carrion following forest fires. The face is round and almost human, its skin naked and red, framed in a lion-like mane. These animals are monkeys. The babukari is a social ground-dwelling New World monkey native to the Amazon grassland of 5 million AD. The babukari is descended from the wakari, which was readily able to adapt to life on the grasslands following the loss of the Amazon rainforest. Although an arboreal animal, the wakari spends a lot of time on the forest floor, and is broadly omnivorous. More importantly, it already has a complex social system, which is important for life on the grasslands. As the trees thinned out, wakaris further developed their social system and began to live in large, social groups, allowing them to forage, communicate and thrive in their rapidly changing habitat. Due to its ground-dwelling behavior, the babukari has longer limbs than a wakari, more like those of a baboon, allowing it to cover long distances on the ground. A babukari is fast enough to easily evade a lone caterpillar. It is quadrupedal, but still retains high levels of dexterity in its hands. In order to better communicate in the long grass of the Amazon prairie, the babukari has streaks of bright blue on its face, buttocks, and chest, as well as a very long, erect, non-prehensile tail which reaches above the top of the grass. The tail does not attract the attention of predators because it resembles an unusually thick blade of grass. Like its ancestor the wakari, the babukari has a bald red head, but unlike its ancestor, its cheeks feature blue triangular patterns, with smaller black streaks, and the bald skin of the chest is also blue and black. Also unlike its shaggy ancestor, much of the hair on its torso has become very short, save for a long mane around its neck. The color of this mane ranges from reddish-brown to yellow, whilst the rest of the babukari's hair ranges from brown to red and yellow, sometimes with red or purple streaks on the limbs, shoulders, back, and tail. Some individuals also seem to have very short beards of yellow stubble. Out on open grasslands, babukaris have established large social groups, allowing them to forage, cover large distances and stay alert for predators. Having high levels of dexterity in their hands, similar to human-era chimpanzees, babukaris have mastered tool use, now constructing and weaving traps to catch fish. These learnt behaviors, passed down from generation to generation, allow babukaris to trap large numbers of fish, of which provide important sources of protein. The babukaris role is similar to human-era baboons. Babukaris are omnivorous and often feed on fish, and are themselves an important prey item to caracillars, which have evolved complex ways of hunting the primates. In turn, the babukari social system also became more complex in order to deal with the threat of caracillars. On a grassy plain, even if the grass is long, there is little cover. Large predatory animals cannot hunt by stealth, so instead they must hunt by speed. The swiftest hunter of the Amazon grasslands is a flightless bird called T. caraciller. The caraciller is a species of huge 2.5-meter-tall predatory flightless bird native to the Amazon grassland of 5 million. It is a descendant of the caracara and through convergent evolution closely resembles the terror birds which hunted the same area dozens of millions of years prior. According to Professor Jeremy Rayner, flight is rather expensive, requiring many evolutionary energies invested into muscles, tendons and hollow bones. With this in mind, following the death of the rainforest, the caracara instead decided to invest these evolutionary energies into a more terrestrial lifestyle, evolving into a huge predatory flightless bird. The caraciller has convergently evolved with the terror birds, complete with long sturdy legs, powerful beak and claws. What stands out most about the caraciller is the coloration, comprised primarily of reds and yellows with a display of feathers at its head. These are used for communicating when hunting, as shown in the documentary. These may also be used to display aggressive behavior, intimidate other individuals, ward off other predators and impress mates. The caracillars communicate through vocal noises. This enables them to work effectively during hunts. The caracillars have established breeding systems similar to present-day ostriches and emus. Multiple females mate with a male and lay eggs in one communal nest. The male then guards it, leaving occasionally to feed the causes for a communal nest. The same as in the said ratites, it is easier to guard a single large nest than multiple smaller ones. The nest itself is a depression in the ground lined with vegetation. Caracillars are among the top predators of Amazon grassland. While adults have no predators, caracillar eggs are often discovered and eaten by rattlebacks due to rattlebacks' desire to eat eggs. Although the caracillar's preferred prey are babukaris, they will take advantage of any opportunities provided to find food. These characteristics can be observed during seasonal bushfires, when the gigantic birds will feed on whatever animals have fallen casualty to the fires. With the end of the ice, Agath world warms up and the Amazon is yet again a tropical rainforest. The animals of the prairie, greater than adapted to grassland life, go extinct. Many viewers found the caracillar impractical. Arguments include that it would take many tens of millions of years to transition from flight to ground dweller, and that killing prey with kicks would be more logical rather than using its beak. A better candidate would be the Suriema, which is already terrestrial, and whose distant relatives are the extinct terror birds. In general, a more likely path of evolution for the caracara or any bird of prey would be to evolve a vulturine or perhaps even peacock-like body form. Some fans have suggested that, although the general idea of the babukari is plausible, another species of monkey such as the capuchin would be a better candidate than the wakari for the babukari's ancestor, given that the bald wakari is a vulnerable species. Other arguments include, while most primates are either endangered or have declining populations, within 5 million years numerous species would still be present rather than just one. Viewers have found numerous traits and characteristics of the South American rattleback impractical. Such traits include an almost snake-like head, and having very little armor near the head and neck, both of which would prove to be exposed weak points. The South American rattleback is presented as having fire-resistant scales, however having plates comprised of keratin would not be ideal, as the rattleback would be left vulnerable to the seasonal fires. Other viewers have pointed out it is doubtful the evolution of the rattlebacks could even occur, given the Amazon rainforest is already home to armored species such as armadillos. The Mediterranean salt flat is a very large salt flat or salt pan covering almost the entirety of the Mediterranean basin, which evaporated after becoming landlocked due to continental drift and falling sea level. 5,000,008 a number of islands, the highlands of what were once true islands. The salt flatas do limestone karst plate aus. Most life in the region is to be found on these islands due to the inhospitable conditions on the salt flat itself. Though there are a few hypersaline lakes on the flat, the water is far too salty to support fish or complex life and would be fatal if ingested. All that lives in these lakes are algae and bacteria which can feed on the salty chemical soup. On the shores support thick clouds of brine flies which feed on the algae and bacteria. Little life exists on the surface of the salt flat itself, though the salt-loving bacteria does thrive, the restaining the surface red in places. One of the few animals to exist out on the salt is a lizard, the cryptile, which is able to effectively camouflage its white body against the salt. The scrophas are descended from the wild boar which ranged across Europe in the human era. Being highly adaptable generalist animals eating a wide variety of different foods, they were well poised to adapt to the rapid changes brought on by the closing of the Strait of Gibraltar, and trapped on the karst plate aus became smaller with more elongated bonus harper hooves and longer snouts. Scrophas are similar physiologically to their ancestors but are smaller, only half the height of the bulkier wild boar, and more lightly built. Their legs are thin and agile with elongated bones and delicate pointed hooves, tips of which they walk on, giving them a stiff-legged gait. Although it looks unusual, this is an efficient way of moving over the karst, allowing them to prance agilely across the clint slabs and over grikes. Their flexible snouts tipped with long lips are longer than those of wild boars, whereand are essentially short trunks. Like their ancestors, scrophas are generalist omnivores which will eat almost anything. Time equals 0 material, but they will also scavenge carrion and eggs, and even kill small, slow-moving animals. Their trunks are particularly useful for searching for food down grikes, wider examples of which they will enter in search of food. Scrophas are mainly social animals which live in small family herds, led by a pair of dominant females and composed mainly of their offspring. The only males in the herd are the juveniles, which leave upon reaching sexual maturity. Adult males are aggressive and solitary, hunting and foraging on their own, mating with the dominant female leaders of herds, and fighting other lone males for these mating privileges. Scroflets are born in the late spring, in litters of between 3 and 6, and are protected by other members of the herd. During foraging, 2 or 3 scrophas will always be acting as sentries, looking out for predators. As scrophas live in an environment where food is scarce, almost anything is on the menu for them, including cryptile eggs laid in grikes, which scrophas can reach down using their long snouts. They may also kill smaller or slower animals they encounter on the karst. Adult scrophas, especially the aggressive boars, are too large to be harmed by any predators on the karst, but scroflets that stray from their herd may be preyed on by birds of prey and grikins. Scrofa herds are safer on the edge of the karst, near the salt pan, but there is little food there. The most fertile regions on the karst are the uplands, the home of the grikin. Down in a narrow grike, this slim, agile creature can wind from side to side, following the tortuous route of the chasm. Now and again the grikin will stop and poke its head out of a grike, keeping an eye on a scrofa herd. The grikin is a species of large predatory mustelid endemic to the Mediterranean salt flat of 5 million AD. It evolved from the pine marten Martes martes, and lives in the grikes, crevices and fissures which separate clint slabs, of the karst plateaus and rocky mountains dotting the salt pan. The ancestor of the grikin was the pine marten Martes martes, and, unlike many other mammals of 5 million AD, it has changed quite a bit compared to its ancestor. The arboreal pine martens had stocky, powerful legs for leaping and a long tail for maintaining balance in the trees. The grikin, living in rocky crevices, needs neither of these, and has evolved a shorter tail and longer legs. However, its general body plan and head is similar to its ancestor, though its body is more elongated. In a case of minor convergent evolution, the grikin, like the giant mustelid called the snowstalker, has evolved very long fangs, which might be called saber teeth, though they are not as long as the snowstalkers. The grikin is about 7 to 8 or 20 centimeters tall at the shoulder, and is much longer. It is a streamlined animal with a slim body and a triangular head, with long and slim limbs to help it squeeze through narrow cracks, and a short tail. It also has a pair of long, dagger-like canine teeth which reach down past its lower jaw. The fur of its face is crossed by a thick black stripe which camouflage its eyes, and its body is also striped to break up its contours and disguise it amongst the vegetation. Living on the karst plateaus of the Mediterranean salt flat, Grycans spend most of their lives in grikes or crevices separating the clints in the uplands of the plateaus, as well as the systems of subterranean caverns which lie below the karst. When stalking prey, they hide themselves within the grikes, popping their heads out from time to keep an eye on their quarry, before leaping from the fissure and pouncing. To kill its prey, the Grycan punctures the throat with its saber teeth, tearing out the windpipe. To avoid being attacked whilst feeding, it may throw its dead prey down into the grikes and caves. The Grycan is called the worst enemy of the scrofa, as it will hunt and kill scroflets which wander too far from the herd. However, adult scrofas are too large and dangerous for the Grycan to attack, and the aggressive boars will in fact charge at the Grycans. It will also attack smaller prey such as cryptiles, which frequently enter grikes to lay their eggs in soil. The eggs themselves are laid in grikes which are far too narrow for the Grycan to access. After hunting, the cryptile's pale coloring allows it to fade back into the white of the salt flats. So positioned, the animal is practically invisible. The cryptile or cryptile lizard is a species of agamid lizard endemic to the Mediterranean salt flat of 5 million AD. It is one of the only vertebrate animals which can survive on the salt pan itself, as opposed to the karst plateaus dotting the region. Lizards are generally adaptable, capable of surviving in a wide diversification on environments including harsh, dry deserts. With the closure of the Mediterranean Sea following the collision of Europe and Africa, agamids were already ready to adapt. To cope with the challenges presented by life out on the salt flats, lizards evolved streamlined bodies and prominent frills, gradually evolving into the cryptile. The cryptile generally maintains its resemblance to its agamid ancestors and is an example of parallel evolution, in this case with the frill-necked lizard. The cryptile's body and limbs have evolved to be more slender and elongated, in order to cover large distances while sprinting out on the salt flats. Its most prominent adaptation being its bizarre, colorful frill developed from loose skin around the neck. During courtship, males will compete, showing off their vivid crests, which are used to intimidate rivals and attract potential mates. These crests may also serve in regulating and maintaining the cryptile's internal temperature, by increasing the surface area to internal volume ratio. Cryptile frills are often used to intimidate other individuals and impress mates. An example of this would be during courtship where males will compete, displaying an array of color, showing of their crests. The female will invite the best-looking male to follow her in a courtship dash across the salt flat. If the male can keep up with her, the two can then mate. While cryptiles display exceptional adaptations for life on the flat, out on the limestone karst plateaus, the lizards must be wary, as they are vulnerable to predation from predators such as the Grycan. Cryptiles are specially adapted to feed on brine flies, from which they receive all their nourishment, including moisture. Though their only predators on the salt are birds of prey, which cryptiles can camouflage themselves against, the salty environment means that female cryptiles cannot lay their eggs on the flat, where the salt would drain them of moisture, killing them. For this, she must travel to the karst plateaus and lay them in the soil down a safe grike, narrow enough to prevent access by a Grycan. Nevertheless, the eggs may be eaten by scrofas which shove their trunks down the grikes or even enter the grikes themselves, and the mother cryptile herself as a prey item for the Grycan. The Bengal swamp is a vast and brackish swampland that was created through continental collisions, 100 million AD. The continents have drifted vast distances since the Quaternary. A massive rift of land which broke away from Africa along the East African Rift has moved across what was the Indian Ocean and collided with the southernmost corner of Southeast Asia. As the two landmasses came together, a vast inland sea was created between in the area that was once the Bay of Bengal. The massive forces created by the colliding tectonic plates buckled the landmass, giving rise to a volcanic mountain range along the line of fusion. Over time, the inland sea became almost entirely cut off from the oceans to the south. Water runoff from the mountains formed rivers which washed fertile sediment into the landlocked sea. Eroded material from the newly exposed rocks was carried downwards, filling the basin and making it shallower and rich in nutrients. Gradually, the inland sea diminished, freshwater from the mountains mixed with the residual saltwater, and a vast, brackish swamp was formed. 100 million AD, the Bengal swamp covers hundreds of thousands of square miles. Sediment carried by slow-moving channels and meandering rivers makes the water thick and impenetrable to light. Sedimentary deposits have a series of oxbow lakes and backwaters separated by muddy islands and flats. The Bengal swamp is comparable in appearance to the great lowland coal swamps of the Carboniferous period. The climate of the Bengal swamp is hot. Its proximity to the equator and the shelter provided by the surrounding mountains mean that average temperatures are about over 40 degrees Celsius. Water is plentiful, running down from the mountains in an intricate network of rivers. Humidity is extremely high, averaging 99% all year round. The muds and soils are constantly replenished by nutrient-rich volcanic ash. A greenhouse environment like this is an ideal place for vegetation to grow. Plant life chokes the waterways and spreads across the lakes. Thickets of tropical plants clothe the sandbanks and deltas. Tightly spaced trees stand where any land is solid enough to hold them, spreading deep canopies of branches and leaves overhead and stabilizing the mud with their network of roots. A host of dangerous creatures dwell in the murky backwat. And shallows of the Bengal swamp beneath the tangle of thick choking vegetation. The Bengal swamp has become so dangerous, so full of large swimming predators that some other water creatures have taken refuge out of the water. Indeed, the atmosphere of this hot swamp is so humid that many aquatic animals can spend time on land and not suffer any discomfort. In an environment such as the Bengal swamp where vegetation flourishes, the presence of large herbivores is no surprise. Once a lurk fish has struck the surrounding area of swamp seems to come to life. The disturbance in the water, splashing noises and electrical signals send out the message that danger has passed. The lurk fish has hunted successfully. The lurk fish is a species of large predatory fish native to the rivers and lakes of the Bengal swamp of 100 million AD. A descendant of the electric catfish, it is notable for its ability to produce a strong electric shock with which it stuns or kills its prey. The lurk fish is a very large fish, 4 meters long. Its scaly skin and weed-like fins spine sand barbels effectively camouflage it as a large log, making it difficult to see in the murky water of the swamp. It has a mail of thick protective plates covering its body beneath the skin, shielding its internal organs. However, its fins and barbels are still vulnerable to attack. The lurk fish's pectoral fins carry muscular spines that bury into the mud, allowing it to dig itself in. As its name implies, the lurk fish's ancestor, electric catfish, could also stun its prey with an electrical charge. Along each side of the lurk fish are stacks of electrical muscles blocks called electrocytes. These electrocytes are able to generate a small charge individually, but when used at once they can generate a cumulative charge of over 1000 volts. The barbels of the lurk fish are also sensitive to any movement in the water. They form an electrical sensory net capable of detecting even the smallest movement of potential prey in the water nearby. The lurk fish is an ambush predator which can remain motionless in the water for several days without eating. EMA equals 0.4 s greater than. It will wait for some time until prey moves within striking range before launching itself forwards and engulfing its victim in its enormous mouth. It then retreats into the thick muddy water deeper in the swamp to eat in safety. Larger, more dangerous prey items which could do injury to the lurk fish, such as the venomous swampasare, paralyzed or outright killed by the lurk fish's electric charge before they get too close. The lurk fish hunts a large number of aquatic swamp animals, but one of its most substantial prey items is the swampusan amphibious octopus. Swampuses must return to the water to replenish their oxygen and to travel, exposing themselves to attack from the lurk fish, which is not affected by the swampus's venomous bite due to its long-range killing method. The atmosphere of this hot swamp is so humid that many aquatic animals can spend time on land and not suffer any discomfort. One creature to have taken advantage of the relative safety of land is the swampus. The swampus or swampus octopus is a species of amphibious octopus native to the Bengal swamp of 100 million AD. Octopuses were already capable of performing basic tasks out of water, such as hauling themselves onto dry land. When the world warmed up, followed the Ice Age, which dominated 5 million AD. Species such as octopuses exploited the opportunities presented by a hothouse world. Habitats that were once restricted due to the colder climates were now open for cephalopods to explore. Now 100 million years hence the humid conditions of the Bengal swamp have allowed species such as the swampus to take refuge out of the water without suffering discomfort. The swampus has evolved to survive on land, though for limited periods of time unable to breathe properly out of water. It relies on finite oxygen stores in its tissues and blood. Once these reserves have been depleted, the swampus must return to the water to replenish its oxygen supply. To further cope with the maneuverability challenges present in an amphibious lifestyle, the swampus has evolved rudder-like paddles to help maneuver and support itself outside of swamp water. The humid conditions of the Bengal swamp have allowed creatures to take refuge out of water. One of the advantage of transitioning to an amphibious lifestyle is raising young. Reek time equals 0.4s greater than living in a more controlled environment allows swampus mothers to regularly monitor and provide food and shelter for their young inside open plants created by seasonal floods. Conquests over stretches of land are common, although they are determined by intimidation, as the swampus would avoid risk of injury in such disputes. The advantages provided in a controlled environment allow swampus mothers to provide food, shelter and protection for their young inside open plants known as nursery vasi. Seasonal floods have created open pools inside these plants. An ideal environment for the swampus to raise their young. Swampus larvae will first acquire their lethal bite from the toxins located inside the plant. Once the swampus's oxygen stores become depleted, it must resurface, leaving it vulnerable to predation. Although swampuses are protective parents, even in groups, adults offer little protection from the carelessness of adult torration, kicking down anything in their paths. Reptiles are doing well due to the warm condition. Sand. This tortoise descendant is the largest animal to have ever walked on Earth, equally at home on dry land or wading through the swamp. They spend the day browsing for food as they have to consume huge amounts of vegetation. The torridon is a species of enormous tortoise native to the Bengal swamp and its surrounding grasslands. In 100 million AD, 7 meters tall and tipping the scales at 120 tons. The torridon is among the largest terrestrial animals in history and certainly the largest animal since the age of the dinosaurs. The torridon have descended from today's tortoises. The lush vegetation in the Bengal swamp provides the tortoises with many nutrients and sources of energy to properly and fully ferment and absorb the nutrients found in these food sources. Tortoises evolved much larger stomachs. Larger stomachs allowed the tortoises to evolve much larger body mass to support its enormous proportions. The torridon's legs are directly underneath the animal itself as opposed to being to its sides. Over a course of millions of years, the torridon's shell has gradually segmented. Given its massive size, torridon has no need for a shell. The torridon resembles its human-era counterpart to some extent. Greater than, though with many prominent evolutionary changes. The torridon is significantly larger than modern tortoises and perhaps even larger than most sauropod dinosaurs. To support its immense size, the torridon's legs are directly underneath the animal itself rather than to its sides like crocodiles and lizards. As adults have no natural predators due to their size, the torridon's shell has now become segmented, allowing the animal to more easily browse for food. Having such a large shell would only succeed in restricting the tortoise's mobility. The torridons are often described and portrayed as enormous eating machines, of which spend the majority of the lives, browsing and consuming huge amounts of rich vegetation. The torridons have established and travel in large herds similar to that of elephants, carelessly knocking over any objects in their path. Torridons are generally gentle giants, though they can be angered when their young are killed. While no animal is capable of bringing down an adult torridon, young torridons may find themselves inflicted and eventually suffocated by the lethal bite of a protective swampus mother, and are vulnerable to predation by predators. When traveling in herds, adult torridons will carelessly kick over whatever objects are blocking their paths, which potentially includes swampus nurseries. During the 100 million AD mass extinction, the skies are blotted out by clouds of ash, lowering temperatures, and much of the vegetation of the Bengal swamp was incinerated by white-hot ash. The cold-blooded torridons could not survive in these conditions. They stood motionless, their vitality seeping away in the cold. The Great Plateau is a very high, mountainous plateau in 100 million AD. Since the Cretaceous period to the Eocene epoch of the Paleogene period, Australia became separated from Antarctica, slowly moving north across the Pacific Ocean towards Asia. Where the two continental plates met, one was pushed below the other, creating a subduction zone to the southeast of the Asian landmass. As the ocean lithosphere, the rigid outer layer of Earth, was drawn down into the mantle and melted, new magma was produced, resulting in large amounts of volcanic activity. Now, in 100 million AD, Australia's short life as a single continent is over, and it has finally fused with the southeastern edge of Asia and later the northeastern edge. Seafloor sediments and rock between the two landmasses have been compressed, sheared, ground together and thrust up into a massive mountain chain. This new chain exceeds the proportions of the Himalayas, the highest mountain range of the Quaternary. Like the Himalayas in their time, these new mountains continue to rise. As the tectonic plates crush against one another, they simultaneously compress the rock downwards into Earth's mantle and upwards into the sky. Further compression has raised a large block of Southeast Asia to form the Great Plateau, the broadest tract of uplands on the surface of the planet. This immense plateau, surrounded by mountains, towers over the shallow shelf seas which cover much of the landmass. Newly formed mountains are sharp and jagged. It takes time for the constant assault of rain, wind, frost and running water to erode them into rounded shapes. In 100 million AD, the Himalayas are mere hills, undulation in the center of the continent. The Great Plateau, on the other hand, consists of ranges of pointed pinnacles and knife-edged crests dropping away into slopes of fragmented rock and scree. The valleys and basins between the ridges have filled with newly eroded debris and formed upland plains, surrounded by peaks reaching up to 10,000 meters, higher than any mountains of the past. How will life survive at this altitude? The climate of the weather-beaten peaks of the Great Plateau will certainly be harsh, but Earth during 100 million AD is warm and volcanic. Sea-activity has thrown large amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, making survival easier. There are ample resources for life to flourish. The Great Plateau, this system of high plains and basins, hemmed in by the highest mountains in the world, is not the dry, cold desert one might expect. Back during the reign of humanity, high-altitude mountain systems such as the Himalayas were home to little more than hardy desert herbs, shrubs and small rodents. Not so the valleys and plains of the Great Plateau. 100 million years on, these are rolling grasslands. At the outer edges of the Great Plateau, the steep, debris-covered slopes are swept by winds bringing seasonal rains up from the shallow seas. The heavy rainfall and loose soil make for an unstable surface, prone to mudslides and rock falls. However, in many areas the surface is stabilized by plant life evolved to cope with just such conditions. The oceanward slope of the Great Plateau is green with true grasses. Ridges and banks of vegetation undulate down into the layer of cloud drifting up from the sea. Beyond a narrow coastal plain, sunlight glints on the crest of the waves. Earthquakes are common, as the plateau is still being pushed up, and it is on the center of the meeting point of multiple tectonic plates. Grass trees are grasses which have resilient, woody stems. In the human era only bamboo generated such stems, but in 100 million AD there are many different species of grass trees native to the Great Plateau. Grass trees are keystone species on the Great Plateau. Their complex underground stems stabilize the loose muddy ground, preventing landslides and making it safe to traverse. Their seeds are harvested by silver spiders, caught in their webs which are spun across the canyons, and are fed to the poggles which the spiders farm. The grass trees of the Great Plateau are wiped out in the 100 million AD mass extinction, leading to the collapse of the ecosystem as animals are deprived of the seasonal influx of grass seeds. The poggles are not just tolerated, they are actively encouraged. The carnivorous silver spiders are farmers of a different kind. The grain harvest is there to feed up the livestock before it is butchered. The poggle is a species of rodent native to the Great Plateau of 100 million AD. It is among the last of the mammals. Poggles are at home in the many caverns honeycombing the plateau, usually sharing their caves with a colony of silver spiders. Large black beady eyes give the poggle good vision, a necessary tool for living in mostly dark caves, though like their ancestors they can grab with their forepaws. A herbivore, poggles mainly, if not exclusively feed on the seeds of grass trees. Poggles are low in the food chain, having been turned into livestock by the silver spiders, who feed them the grass tree seeds to fatten the poggles up, and when this is accomplished one spider takes the poggle prisoner and presents it to the queen, who then kills it. Female poggles in estrus in particular are specifically eaten by the queen spiders to help them reproduce. It is unknown if poggles leave their caves or face predation from other animals. Just as some species of spiders in previous times spun webs with an ultraviolet sheen in order to attract insects, so too do the spiders of this time. Spread across the slopes of the Great Plateau, giant silver webs billow gently in the wind. The silver spider is a species of colonial spider native to the Great Plateau of 100 million AD. The silver spider, judging by the structure and body shape, has likely descended from the redback spider or a similar species. When Australia completed its continental course, colliding with Asia and North America, the spiders over millions of years adapted numerous behavioral traits similar of that of the order Hymenoptera, being ruled by a queen with the majority of all spiders spending their lives as workers. This behavioral system advanced further following the relationship established between the spiders and the poggles, a shy rodent of which the spiders farm as livestock. The silver spider behaves rather like Hymenoptera, being ruled by a queen with the majority being workers. Their shiny appearances are due to the colors being meant to reflect ultraviolet radiation in their high-altitude home. Their webs are the largest in the world. To build, the smallest and youngest workers parasail from one side of a gorge to the other with a dandelion and a silk thread. Once this is completed, a GGER worker comes over, adds another line and walks out onto the thread. In a few hours they will complete the web, which looks as though it is made up of smaller webs sewn together like their ancestors. They do possess venomous fangs. The silver spider have established a behavioral system similar to that of Hymenoptera, being ruled by a queen with the majority being workers. The workers will spend the majority of their lives constructing webs in between cave systems and collecting grass tree seeds for the piggies to consume. When the toggle reaches ideal weight, the plump rodent is slain and devoured by the spider queen, allowing her to access the hormones from the poggle's bloodstream, of which she acquires. Silver spiders have formed a relationship with the poggle, a rodent and one of the few mammals still alive. Sadly, the poggles have been turned into livestock by the spiders, who feed them seeds from grass trees caught in the webs, fatten them up, and when this is done the now plump poggle is slain and devoured. Silver spiders themselves are food for the great blue windrunner, though it's possible the spiders feed on them too. The windrunner is small enough to be caught in the webs, though aside from the poggle it is unknown for certain what else the spider eats. The great blue windrunner can soar at high altitudes, making use of its long narrow wings. At low speeds the bird requires greater maneuverability and so deploys an additional pair of wings from its legs for extra surface area and uplift. The great blue windrunner is a large species of gruiform bird native to the lowland regions south of the Great Plateau of 100 million AD. A descendant of the cranes, it is notable for having a second pair of wings in its hind legs. The windrunner is a descendant of human-era cranes. When Australia completed its continental drift, colliding with Asia and North America, much of the crane's habitat was replaced by an enormous mountainous range. The crane abandoned its wetland marshes and rivers in favor of a migratory lifestyle. The crane has developed long narrow wings, as having a large wingspan allows the windrunner to cover larger distances to increase its maneuverability and further aid its landing when descending on mountainous peaks. The windrunner evolved wing feathers down on its legs. Time equals 0.2 s. Greater than this not only allows the bird to cover larger distances but allows for a smoother landing. Soaring at such a great altitude leaves the windrunner vulnerable to harmful ultraviolet rays, which led to the evolution of the windrunner's blue plumage, which repels the sun's harmful UV rays. The windrunner is a migratory bird that visits the plateau during the spring and summer months, where they nest and raise their young. The windrunner's coloration is designed to repel harmful ultraviolet radiation. The windrunner has also evolved its wing feathers down on its legs, giving it a tandem wing appearance which allows the bird to travel greater distances. The windrunner is a migratory bird covering large distances to find food for their young, which they raise and care for on mountainous peaks. One of the primary reasons the windrunners choose to raise their young on mountainous peaks is the absence of large predators, as few predators can survive out on isolated, lifeless plateau. The windrunner only comes to the plateau during the warmer seasons, where they can nest and care for their young in relative safety. Carnivorous, the windrunner's diet is made up of silver spiders which they snatch from the spanning webs in the plateau's many canyons. While it may be possible the windrunner itself is vulnerable to predation by the silver spider, it is unknown if the windrunner faces predation itself, in the plateau or otherwise. Although the great blue windrunner is generally regarded as being plausible, with most present-day crane species either being endangered or having declining populations, it is doubtful evolution could give rise to such a species. The silver spider is a controversial topic, due to the way it has manipulated the poggle. Realistically, such fast-breeding rodents could easily outnumber and escape the spiders. Most viewers stated that the idea of mammals being on brink of extinction is implausible as mammals are highly adaptable even at huge losses. Arguments include that surviving mammals would most likely not get outcompeted by reptiles, fish, birds, and invertebrates in the way presented in the future as wild, which some fans even found insulting. Realistically, fast-breeding rodents such as the poggle may have easily outnumbered and escaped the silver spider, though it may be possible that the poggle reproduces more slowly than other rodents. This rainforest has evolved from whatever plant species made it to the isolated continent first. Similarly, the animals there have radiated to fill all the available niches have evolved from relatively few ancestors, as reaching this virgin continent was so difficult. The Antarctic forest or Antarctic rainforest is a large tropical rainforest in the north of the continent of Antarctica in 100 million AD. By this era, Antarctica has drifted far north enough for it to lie partially in the tropics, and the Antarctic forest is a lush place flourishing with unique plant and animal life, particularly those that have mastered flight such as birds and insects. The Antarctic plate has been moving northwards for 100 million years, gradually creeping towards the southern edge of Asia. This plate has carried the continent out of the polar zone, through the southern temperate zone and across the southern desert belt. The forest covers almost the entirety of Antarctica's northern region, including several mountainous areas. The south of the continent still lies in colder climes, so the forest has not spread far south. The Antarctic forest lies in the tropics, not too far south of the equator, and is therefore very warm, especially given 100 million AD's generally higher global temperatures. Trade winds also bring year-round warm rains, giving a further boost to plant life. The first vertebrate settlers were birds, their powers of flight enabling them to cross the oceans to reach the isolated continent, and they brought with them yet more seeds and insects. As Antarctica is an island continent, separated from the rest of the world by hundreds of miles of sea, all life in the Antarctic forest has flown or been blown there. While the continent lays in the polar regions, its plant life consisted mainly of mosses, lichens, and algae. However, as it drifted north, seeds and spores of true plants were blown west from South America, and those seeds which survived established themselves in Antarctica and radiated into several different species, eventually giving rise to the Antarctic forest itself. More plants were brought over with successive animal migrations, and the Antarctic forest is home to a great variety of plant life, including the Spitfire tree, a keystone species on which several animals rely. The first foreign animals to arrive on the continent were spiders and insects which were lightweight enough to be carried there on the winds. They flourished among the developing plant life and eventually evolved into larger forms due to high global oxygen levels. Insects are the dominant predators of the Antarctic forest, with giant wasps chasing down other animals and predatory beetles ambushing them. Birds, specifically tube-nosed seabirds like petrels, shearwaters, fulmars and albatrosses, inhabited the coasts of Antarctica even when it was covered in ice, and with the development of the forest they evolved into myriad forms. The most common birds are the flutterbirds, which come in a variety of shapes and forms, but there are other bird families including ones which have become ground dwellers. The forest is also home to other non-tube-nosed birds which arrived from across the seas. The Spitfire tree is a species of flowering tree native to the Antarctic forest of 100 million AD. It is a keystone species of the forest's ecosystem. The male and female flowers of the Spitfire tree produce different chemicals which become volatile when mixed together. The Spitfire bird drinks these chemicals and mixes them in its crop, using them as a powerful chemical weapon against predators such as falconflies. Spitfire birds also help to pollinate the trees as they pick up and drop seeds when they dip their beaks into the flowers. The Spitfire bird's reliance on the trees is exploited by Spitfire beetles, which are able to disguise themselves as Spitfire blossoms and then kill the birds when they come in to feed. False Spitfire birds also stay around Spitfire trees in order to mimic true Spitfire birds and so warn off predators. With a squawk and a flurry of feathers, two tumble through the branches and undergrowth and crash to the ground. There the falconfly rips the victim to pieces with its powerful jaws. The falconfly is a species of giant predatory wasp native to the Antarctic forest of 100 million AD. Greater than it is the top predator of the forest and preys on birds including flutterbirds. The falconfly is the size of a human-era bird of prey such as a kestrel, has a very powerful set of jaws. Its forelimbs have small hooks which allow it to grab prey, whilst its hind limbs have very sharp lance-like tips which can be used to impale or stab prey like other wasps. It also has a venomous sting. Falconflies are aerial predators which seize their prey with their hooked legs and either use their hind legs like a lance or a harpoon to stab deep into the prey's internal organs or give the prey a jab with their sting. The falconfly will tackle the prey down onto the forest floor and tear it to pieces using its jaws. Falconflies give birth to 3 to 4 maggots which are each laid in a separate burrow to prevent them from cannibalizing one another. A mother falconfly will take care of her maggots, returning to her burrows to feed her young with lumps of flesh from butchered prey. She remembers where each burrow is by memorizing familiar landmarks. Falconflies prey on flying birds such as flutterbirds, most notably the defenseless roachgator. Not all flutterbirds are so defenseless, however. The Spitfire bird is capable of spitting hot acid at attackers, driving them off. Another species of flutterbird, the false Spitfire bird, is itself harmless, but it mimics the appearance of the true Spitfire bird to warn off predators including falconflies. Even so, the falconfly can overpower the Spitfire bird if the bird has run out of ammo and is attempting to restock, sometimes stealing from Spitfire beetles. Motionless, the Spitfire beetles wait, mimicking the flowers of the Spitfire tree. As it moves in, the beetles leap into action, seizing the bird before it can bring its defenses into play. Grasshopper-like hind legs propel the attack, and strong jaws and grappling hooked claws on the forelegs crunch into the bird's body. The Spitfire beetle is a species of social predatory beetle native to the Antarctic forest of 100 million AD, notable for their ability to closely mimic the appearance of a Spitfire tree blossom in order to ambush prey. Spitfire beetles resemble a typical beetle of the human era. K time equals 0.2s greater than and, individually, are notable only for their bright red and yellow coloration. Their hind legs are similar to those of grasshoppers, allowing them to propel themselves forwards, and their forelegs have grappling hook-like claws. Several parts of their body help them to resemble Spitfire blossoms: their coloration, their stamen-like antennae, their petal-like elytra, and their heads and thoraxes, which when put together resemble the center of a flower. Spitfire beetles spend most of their lives in sibling groups of 4. They are carnivorous ambush predators, and, to hunt, they mimic the appearance of a Spitfire tree blossom. The 4 beetles position themselves on a Spitfire trunk, standing head-to-head in a cross formation, then spread their wings, revealing the highly camouflaged parts of their bodies. The beetles will wait until a Spitfire bird approaches the flower, then leap at it using their grasshopper-like legs, seizing it and killing it with their strong jaws and hooked claws. All 4 beetles will then share the carcass of the bird. When the Spitfire tree's flowering season ends and Spitfire birds no longer approach the trees, the beetle colonies disperse, moving off in search of mates. Once mated, the male beetle dies, and the pregnant female lays clutches of 4 eggs beneath the bark of Spitfire trees. The female beetle also dies soon afterwards, and the eggs hatch the following spring, when the Spitfire tree's flowering season has begun again. The Spitfire beetle is one of a large community of organisms which relies on the Spitfire tree. As noted above, not only is it specifically adapted to hunt Spitfire birds by imitating the flower of the tree, it also lays its eggs beneath its bark. Because Spitfire birds get their acidic chemicals from the Spitfire tree flowers, the beetles don't have to worry about getting sprayed, since a Spitfire bird will only move in to feed from a flower when its store of chemicals is depleted. On a few occasions the beetles get robbed of their prey by falconflies. The roachcutter uses its keen eyesight to spot prey. Its wings are short and broad, giving it great maneuverability in the dense forest. The roachcutter is a species of flutterbird native to the Antarctic forest of 100 million. It is a specialized insect hunter and is the swiftest of the flutterbirds. The roachcutter is a small flutterbird about the size of a sparrow and can be distinguished from other flutterbirds by its purple feathers which turn to cream on its head and iridescent blue on its wingtips and by its eyes which are mounted on turrets. Its beak is also very strong and capable of crushing hard exoskeletons. Its short wings have a high aspect ratio, they are short and broad, which makes them perfect for making tight turns in mid-air, and their tips are splayed out like fingers allowing them to manipulate the passage of air, increasing the roachcutter's maneuverability. Thus it is able to both slowly navigate tight space and fly at very high speeds. The roachcutter is a specialized predator of insects, scanning tree trunks for small insects using its turreted eyes. However, it is itself hunted by an insect, the falconfly, a giant wasp. Roachcutters have no defense against falconflies which have hooked four-legged harpoon-like hind legs, powerful jaws and venomous stings. It dips its head repeatedly into the flower from which it appears to be feeding. Suddenly there may be a hum and flutter as the other residents of the forest canopy flee an approaching predator, but rather than darting away to safety, this bird faces the danger as the predator draws near. Spitfire bird will lower its head, then at the last possible moment it sprays a hot corrosive acid from its nostrils. The Spitfire bird is a species of flutterbird native to the Antarctic forest of 100 million AD. Using chemicals gathered from the Spitfire tree, it is capable of shooting a nasty acid-like chemical substance at potential predators. They may appear cute, but when they attack you will be running. Spitfire birds are perhaps the most dangerous birds in the Antarctic jungle due to their secret weapon. They also have bright colors to warn predators of said secret weapon, something that another flutterbird exploits, the false Spitfire bird. K time equals 0.4s greater than. Spitfire birds behave rather like hummingbirds. Aside from feeding on flowers, they can also hover. The falconfly is one of its predators, though when hit by the bird's chemicals they'll give them a wide berth, but if the Spitfire bird has run out of chemicals then the falconfly can subdue it. The bird's main predator though is the Spitfire beetle, who exploit the bird's need to replenish their chemicals by mimicking the flowers. Four beetles will clump together, pose as a flower, and when a bird approaches they pounce and kill it. The false Spitfire bird is a species of flutterbird native to the Antarctic forest of 100 million AD. It is a docile cousin of the Spitfire bird, and mimics its appearance as a form of defense against predators. Due to the Spitfire bird's notoriety for shooting burning chemicals at predators, falconflies that had run-ins will avoid preying on this species as well. It is unknown if the false Spitfire bird has the same dietary preferences or is hunted by Spitfire beetles. The shallow seas is a vast warm shallow seaway in 100 million AD. 100 million AD. A warm global climate has caused the polar ice caps to melt, sea levels to rise by around 100 meters. Lower-lying parts of the continents are flooded and the oceans have spread southwards from the Arctic and eastwards from the Atlantic. Vast tracts of Russia are now almost entirely underwater. The shallow seas which stretch across northern Europe and Asia are punctuated by rocky islands. The sun-filled nutrient-rich waters of the shallow seas provide ideal conditions for the formation of reefs. Reefs are essentially calcium deposits built up by generations of reef-building marine organisms. These organisms contract calcium dissolved in seawater and use it to lay down protective shells over successive generations. The shells and skeletons of the reef-building organisms accumulate to create a great edifice, a solid foundation upon which reef builders live and photosynthesize. This edifice is a reef. The shallow seas and their colorful complex reefs have presented a stable environment for a long time. They have persisted for so many millions of years that effective living systems established early on in the history of the habitat have been able to survive without serious challenges. As a result, creatures' body shapes, feeding methods and symbiotic relationships have modified only slightly over time. However, these warm seas have allowed one thing to change: a lotand that is a creature's size. With the recent glacial period in 5 million AD came massive climatic disruption. The seas filled with mud, depriving the algae of the sunlight they needed for survival. Without the algae and the essential nutrients they provided, the corals also became extinct some time later. Thousands of millions of years later, there are large areas of warm shallow water and conditions are right for reefs to develop once more. These Timoth reefs are formed not from coral but from a prolific species of red algae. A variety of red algae is native to the shallow seas. It is the most populous organism of these seas. Greater than where it has replaced corals in creating reefs, and as an important food or energy source for both reef gliders and ocean phantoms. The ocean phantom conceals a secret weapon inside specially adapted tentacles. In return for food and shelter, an army of vicious spindletroopers is on hand to defend the phantom from other predators. The spindletrooper is a species of highly specialized sea spider native to the shallow seas of 100 million AD. It has a symbiotic relationship with the ocean phantoms, which provide small armies of spindletroopers with shelter and food in exchange for defense. Spindle troopers have evolved to live side by side with ocean phantoms. A single phantom can have as many as 12 or so spindle troopers living among the tentacles, some of which have morphed into capsules similar in shape to bladderwort plants the spindle troopers use as houses. Despite being arachnids, spindle troopers are vegetarians and feed on the red algae growing on the phantom's back. In return, spindle troopers loyally protect the phantom from predators, such as reef gliders. The spindle troopers will leap at the attacker and begin biting it repeatedly until said attacker backs off, whereas the spindle troopers will swim back to the phantom. It is unknown if spindle troopers have predators of their own. The large form of a reef glider can often be seen sweeping through the water, silhouetted against the bright surface and throwing its shadow across a red alga reef. From its bulbous, teardrop-shaped body protrude 3 pairs of paddles. A long bunch of streamer-like filaments trails behind. It is difficult to believe that this is a variety of nudibranch, bigger than any of its relatives. The reef glider is a species of giant free-swimming nudibranch or sea slug found in the shallow seas of 100 million AD. Growing up to 4 meters in length, reef gliders are the largest known gastropods in history. They are highly successful, and by the 100 million AD mass extinction, in which they vanished, they had already existed in their final form for millions of years. The reef glider has descended from today's nudibranchs. Following the Ice Age of 5 million AD, the waning of the ice caps, gradual warming of the world's oceans and extinction of coral reefs, the sea slugs abandoned crawling in order to meet challenges presented by a warmer, more open environment. The nudibranch became oval-shaped, developing paddles, flesh extensions extending from its sides and gills now trailing behind in a colorful display. Fully grown reef gliders can grow up to 4 meters, oval-shaped and somewhat bloated, though less vibrant than its human-era counterpart. The reef glider sports eyes mounted on stalks, a cone-shaped, beak-like mouth and a display of bumpy, scent-detecting chemical receptors, called rhinophores. As opposed to crawling across reefs by expanding and contracting its body, the reef glider has developed paddles, flesh extensions extending from its sides, each pair beats in turn propelling the animal across the shallow seas. While the adults are predators, young reef gliders derive most of their nutrients from red algae, feeding from the cup-like structures formed by the algae, where deposits of protein and carbohydrate are stored. Symbiotically, they also help the algae to reproduce. When the gliders reach their mouths into the algae's cups, their beaks become coated with sticky strands of reproductive gamete cells, which are then scraped off inside another algae's cup when the glider feeds again. The algae may be specially adapted to be pollinated specifically by reef gliders, as their flowers are precisely the right size and shape for a juvenile reef glider's front end. Young reef gliders themselves are hunted by ocean phantoms, giant colonial siphonophore, which catch them using their tentacles when the young gliders are gyrating among the red algae. Sometimes a baby reef glider will even approach an ocean phantom willingly, out of curiosity. The adult reef gliders, however, are too large to be harmed by ocean phantoms, and are in fact its chief predators. Adult gliders hunt ocean phantoms in packs, devouring their air sacs, tentacles, rudders, and keels, every part of the phantom beneath the waterline. Phantoms, however, also have a defense in the form of spindletroopers. Something large and sinister glides slowly overhead. It casts a long shadow which creeps across the irregular surface of the reef. This is not the shadow of an adult reef glider, but something much slower, much bigger and much more dangerous. The ocean phantom is a marine siphonophore native to the shallow seas covering Central and Northern Asia 100 million AD. It is a giant type of siphonophore, a colonial organism composed of several individuals which serve different roles, and can grow up to 30 feet long and be composed of several thousand polyps, making it the largest marine animal of 100 million AD. The ocean phantom's human-era ancestor is the Portuguese man-o'-war. The ocean phantom is a jack-of-all-trades creature. It can propel itself by puffing out many dorsal fins and use them as sails, but can also use jet propulsion like cephalopods. The phantom's back is often covered in red-colored algae, which the phantom gives to the spindletroopers living among the tentacles. Beneath the phantom are trawling tentacles. Some act as harpoons for catching prey while others become homes for the spindletroopers. Like their ancestors, the phantom is capable of stinging. Ocean phantoms are nomadic by nature, traveling vast distances wherever the wind takes them. Small reef gliders are the primary prey of the phantom, but they themselves are hunted by bigger reef gliders. Fortunately, the phantom has formed a relationship with the arthropod, the spindletrooper, often having a personal army who loyally defend their host from attack, and in return the phantom feeds them the algae growing on its back. When volcanic eruptions blot out the sky in the 100 million AD mass extinction, the oceans of the world are hit particularly hard, as the microorganisms which the whole ecosystems rely upon die off quickly. The water temperature falls and the prevailing currents fail. The ocean phantoms deflate and die, and soon go extinct. The ocean phantom is a controversial topic mainly due to its complex nature and mutualism established with other organisms. Arguments include the siphonophore is too hypothetical. The reef glider has faced mild controversy. Primary arguments have targeted the nudibranch's large proportions presented in the future as wild. The Central Desert is a vast desert 200 million years later. Its surface is an inhospitable environment, but life has adapted to survive the extreme temperatures and lack of water. It is a wilderness of drifting sand seas, sun-cracked stones and shattered gravel. Unbearable extremes of heat and dryness combine to produce the most hostile living conditions. There are no clouds and the summer sun sears the bare rocks and sand so that temperatures reach a withering 50 degrees Celsius in the daytime. At night, the accumulated heat is radiated away to the frosty sky and temperatures dive to a bitter -30 degrees Celsius. In winter, parts of the northern interior are colder than Earth's surface has ever been. Such are the conditions for life at the heart of the continent. The most remote areas of the Central Desert have not seen rain for hundreds of years. So where is the water that is essential for life? This region was once covered by warm, shallow seas, formed when sea levels were high and the climate was temperate. Gradually, as the continents piled into on another, the land was uplifted and the shallow seas drained off into deep ocean basins. Rain filtered into the limestone and created a sprawling labyrinth of limestone caves deep below the Central Desert. At the edge of the desert, constant rain drenches the seaward mountain slopes and soaks into the strata, eventually seeping into the porous limestone of the mainland. Over time, this water fills the subterranean reservoirs that lie below the Central Desert, giving life to the barren wastes above. The animals and plants that exist in this arid land are true specialists. Experts in enduring extremes of temperature, they survive through the single-minded pursuit of water. The most successful living creatures in the Central Desert are insects. For 600 million years, their remarkable adaptability has enabled them to survive the most extreme conditions and weather out all the great mass extinctions the planet has suffered. More than any other living animal, insects are able to diversify into and exploit any number of ecological niches. In the hostile environment of the central desert, insects have found a way to create their own living conditions. The sunburnt surface of the central desert belies the labyrinth of limestone caves and water-filled fissures beneath. They stay the same temperature all year, and stretch for thousands of kilometers beneath the desert. To explore this hidden world, it is necessary to look in more detail at its formation. The limestone deposits are a relic of the reefs and muds of the shallow seas that once existed here. As the continents collided, the land rose up, displacing the shallow seas and compressing the mud's reefs into solid stone. Limestone is made up of the shelly debris of marine life and is easily eroded and dissolved by acids in the groundwater. The action of these acids initially creates small pores but, over time, larger caves can result. Despite the acidity of the water and the total lack of sunlight, one group of animal has flourished, polychaetes, a class of segmented annelid worms also known as bristleworms. Normally all life derives indirectly from sunlight. Plants convert carbon dioxide and water into food using the energy of the sun. Plant-eating animals eat this food and are in turn eaten by carnivorous predators. In the darkness of the caverns, this does not apply. Instead, the initial energy is derived from chemicals. Bioluminescent bacteria break down sulfur compounds in the rocks and grow on the energy released, forming an incrustation on the cave walls. Throughout this complex social structure there seems to be a single, corporate intelligence that understands the requirements of the whole colony. The colony functions as though it were a single organism, its whole truly greater than the sum of its parts. The terabyte is a species of eusocial insect native to the central desert of Pangaea II in 200 million AD. A terabyte colony lives in a large tower, about 2 meters tall, which they build, and is composed of a number of different castes, each with its own role to play. Terabytes are descended from termites, one of nature's great survivors, which easily made it through the 100 million AD mass extinction and developed an even more extreme caste system, as well as more advanced chemical weapons. A more recent ancestor of the terabytes lived in what would become Central Desert before conditions became so inhospitable. In those days, pools of water were more common, and a kind of green algae flourished on the surface of these pools, fed on by the terabytes' ancestors. As conditions worsened, the oases disappeared and aquifers sank further below the surface, so the terabytes' ancestors began to burrow down to reach the algae and bring it to the surface to photosynthesize. Eventually, in the terabytes, this would develop into a full-scale farming operation. The various castes of terabytes all have different appearances, but most follow the same basic body plan. Only the transporter caste has functional legs, the others have vestigial legs, or none whatsoever. Several castes including gum spitters and rock borers have disproportionately large heads, giving them more room to generate their chemical weapons. Most terabyte castes have internal chemical factories allowing them to generate a wide variety of chemical weapons and tools. Some chemicals secreted by different terabyte castes are acid-based, others are glue or gum-like, and still more function similarly to cement. Terabyte society has rigorously defined roles for every individual. All terabytes are divided into biologically distinct castes, each of which has an important role to play. As they are legless, most of the castes are carried from place to place by transporter terabytes. The founder of a terabyte colony is the constantly reproducing queen, who spends her life in one of the underground nests. Terabytes are highly territorial and aggressive. Terabytes are herbivorous animals, and subsist on a type of green algae which is found on the surfaces of oases, and on the bodies of garden worms. To gather algae, terabyte war parties often march towards nearby pools, where they immobilize garden worms and cut the algae out of their flesh. This algae is farmed and grown by the terabytes in the greenhouses of the towers they live in. Although there are rare pools of surface water in the central desert, terabytes draw most of their water from the underground reservoirs below the desert. To accomplish this, members of rock boring and biting castes dig tunnels to the reservoirs. And water carriers fill themselves with water which they expel when they are transported back to the tower. Terabytes farm a variety of green algae found in the central desert in their towers, using it as nourishment for the whole colony. Although they are herbivorous animals, terabytes must attack garden worms to obtain the green algae in the first place, as it grows on the worm's fleshy lobes to get the algae. Terabyte gum spitters immobilize the worm whilst transporters cut off pieces of its algae-filled flesh, a process which does not seriously harm the worm. Garden worms are not entirely defenseless, however, and like the terabytes they can secrete a natural chemicalone which dissolves the glue spat by warriors, allowing them to escape. Terabyte towers, which may be several feet high, are constructed by the builder Castant, are made of sand grains, the remains of dead terabyte sand feces, the particles of which are all cemented together by a special chemical secreted by the builders. A single city of terabyte towers may be built over hundreds of years. Below the externally visible terabyte tower is a labyrinthine system of tunnels and caves hundreds of meters deep, dug out by the rock borers and biters. These caves house the terabytes' nests and are home to the queen, whilst the tunnels lead to the subterranean reservoirs from where the terabytes draw their water. The above-ground stories are a brilliantly engineered greenhouse farm running down the middle of the tower as a pole supporting several circular platforms on which green algae grows. The top of the tower is filled with small windows made out of transparent polymer, allowing daylight to shine into the structure and onto the algae. The heat from the sun evaporates water in specially constructed wells at the base of the tower, cooling the atmosphere inside and causing a convection effect when the air falls, circulating carbon dioxide-rich air through the tower. The combination of sunlight and carbon dioxide provides ideal conditions for the algae to grow and photosynthesize. At daybreak, garden worms come slithering out of the fissures in the rock and spread themselves out to catch the rays of the rising sun. They hump up their middle sections and begin to unfurl green fern-like tissues that branch and fan out from the segments of its body. The garden worm is a species of photosynthetic amphibious bristleworm native to the central desert of Pangaea II in 200 million AD. 4s, greater than it has a symbiotic relationship with a variety of green algae, which provides it with a constant food source on its own body. The garden worm is one of a number of polychaetes endemic to the central desert, and belongs to the family Phylobranchidae. The garden worm is descended from a marine bristleworm of the family Trichobranchidae, which became trapped in a system of underground reservoirs when the shallow sea was displaced by the formation of Pangaea II and became the central desert. This single worm flourished and diversified into several families, including that of the garden worm, which seems to be the only central desert polychaete which ever leaves the caverns. The garden worm is about 45 cm long and some 3.5 cm high. It generally resembles a very large segmented worm, with a large number of short, stubby legs, a pair of short horny projections above its two compound eyes. Its most distinguishing feature is several long, fleshy lobes running down each side of its body, all of which are packed with algae, which turns them green. Other parts of its body, including its face and areas of its back, are also stained green by algae. The algal growths and green coloration make the whole animal resemble a sort of strange plant. It is capable of secreting a chemical dissolvent from between its segments, which is able to dissolve terabyte glue, and a foul-smelling or tasting liquid which repels other animals when secreted in water. The garden worm is semi-aquatic and a fast swimmer, and lives mainly in the subterranean reservoirs which are scattered beneath the central desert. The garden worm's symbiotic relationship with algae means that it never has to seek out its own food. The algae growing in its lobes provides it with all the nutrients it needs. However, in order for the algae to photosynthesize, garden worms must spend a large amount of time each day basking in the sun on the desert surface. When basking, they raise their midsections off the ground by almost half their own length, then unfurl and fan out their algal tendrils. The garden worm has a very close symbiotic relationship with a variety of green algae, which grows inside the fleshy lobes running along the garden worm's sides. The algae creates food from nothing but air, water, and sunlight, allowing the garden worm to survive in the harsh environment of the central desert. The relationship also benefits the algae, allowing it to photosynthesize when the garden worms bask in the sun for exactly that purpose. Garden worms are also important for terabytes, which harvest the green algae and farm it as their own food source. A special terabyte caste, the gum spitter or warrior, has developed to incapacitate basking garden worms whilst transporters harvest the algae, a process which does not seriously harm the worm. Garden worms are able to dissolve the restrictive glue shot by terabytes by secreting their dissolvent. Another animal which hunts garden worms is the slick ribbon, another aquatic polychaete found in the subterranean caverns. The acidic secretions of the garden worm may also be used to repel these predators. The green bacterial meadows of the underground pools are grazed by the gloomworm. The gloomworm is a species of bacteriophagic aquatic bristleworm endemic to the underground reservoirs below the central desert of Pangaea II in 200 million AD. The gloomworm is one of a number of polychaetes endemic to the central desert, and belongs to the family Bacteriophagidae. The gloomworm is descended from a marine bristleworm of the family Trichobranchidae, which became trapped in a system of underground reservoirs when the shallow sea was displaced by the formation of Pangaea II and became the central desert. This single worm flourished and diversified into several families, including that of the gloomworm. Half-a-meter-long animals which travel in groups. Gloomworms feed exclusively on a kind of bacteria which grows on the walls of the caverns below the central desert, and are themselves preyed upon by slick ribbons. The slick ribbon is a fearsome predator. Its jaws are mounted on an extendable trunk that snaps out at passing prey. The slick ribbon is a species of predatory aquatic bristleworm endemic to the underground reservoirs below the central desert of Pangaea II in 200 million AD. It is one of a number of polychaetes endemic to these reservoirs, where it is the apex predator. It belongs to the family Megaphosidae. The slick ribbon is descended from marine bristleworms of the family Trichobranchidae, which became trapped in a system of underground caverns when the shallow sea was displaced by the formation of Pangaea II and became the central desert. This single worm flourished and diversified into several families, including that of the slick ribbon. The slick ribbon grows to about a meter in length, and, like the garden worm, has a long, segmented body. It has a large number of paddles running down the sides of its body, one pair to each segment, accompanied by adjacent bristles which detect changes in water pressure. It has an unusual head structure, with stalked eyes, two ambiguous plumes projecting from either side of its head, and a large mouth with two powerful pincers mounted on a long, extendable trunk. The slick ribbon's mouth and tusks are not visible or usable until it extends its trunk to catch prey. The slick ribbon is an aquatic predator which catches its prey by snapping out its long, extendable trunk mouth. It is a swift swimmer, with its multitude of paddles beating in a wave-like action almost like an aquatic millipede, but it is not as agile as its cousin the garden worm. As the apex predator of the caverns, slick ribbons will hunt other polychaete worms including gloomworms and garden worms. Gloomworms are defenseless, but the larger and more nutritious garden worms, which are not always present in the caverns, can put up a fight against slick ribbons by secreting a disgusting chemical into the water. In 200 million AD, the northwestern part of the new supercontinent Nova Pangaea has a truly bizarre and massive rainforest stretching for thousands of kilometers. The region in the northwest of Nova Pangaea is pounded by saturated onshore winds. The global circulation of the atmosphere brings constant westerly winds to this part of the landmass, winds which travel over a vast surface of warm ocean filling up with moisture as they go. Thick black clouds roll in from the sea and condense into water as soon as they reach land. Sunlight is rarely seen here. Rain falls relentlessly from the overhead, darkness drenching everything below. With no mountain range to act as a windbreak, the rain-sodden region stretches hundreds of miles inland. Great rivers carry the runoff back to the sea through swamps and lakes surrounded by deep murky forests. With all this water, a carbon dioxide-rich atmosphere and warm global temperatures, forests thrive and grow to immense proportions. The tallest trees here are conifers, which grow to the same great heights as the giant redwood trees and other pinnales that have dominated this area since the Triassic period. Only a handful of specialized species are able to survive the wet conditions of the northern forest. Flowering plants are rare in this lush forest. They have been mostly replaced by another highly versatile organism, lichen. In the rich habitat of the northern forest there is no shortage of animal life. The low level of the forest is a tangle of lichen trees. Their trailing feathery structures absorb moisture and photosynthesize their spores bursting from sacs as animals brush BRA easily distributed. The lichen tree is a type of large superficially tree-like lichen populating the northern forest of Pangaea II in 200 million AD. They are a keystone species of the lichen forest biome. As it is not an individual organism, the lichen tree did not strictly speaking evolve in the conventional sense of the term. Lichens were allowed to grow into larger, more complex forms due to greater buildups of dead fungus in the trunk-like core thanks to the dark and damp environmental conditions of the northern forest and the lack of competition due to the wet environment and the catastrophic 100 million AD mass extinction. EAK time equals 0.4s greater than. Lichens are composite organisms made out of algae and different types of fungus, with the fungus providing a protective outer layer, and the algae providing nourishment from within. Lichen trees are sturdy and superficially tree-like in form, and may grow up to 3 meters in height. Instead of the soft fleshy bodies of human-era lichens, they have hard, robust trunks built up from dead fungal fiber accumulated in the tree's core. Lichen trees are hollow and fall of small holes, allowing sufficiently small organisms to live inside them. As they are not true plants, they have no leaves, they have only a wide trunk and a number of bare branches. In this way, they are somewhat evocative of human-era dead trees. To photosynthesize and gather moisture, lichen trees trail feathery algal structures like curtains in the humid air. They reproduce by growing large sacs filled with assemblages of both lichen and fungal spores. These sacs explode upon any contact, so their dispersal is easily aided by large animals brushing past the trees. Lichen trees also grow their own kind of fruit, a diamond-shaped lichen pod or lichen tree pod, which is used as food by several species. The lichen tree is an important species in the northern forest. Animals such as squibbons and forest flish use it for roosting, and all the known pterosquid feed on its fruits. One species of flish, the hornbill flish, is specially adapted to feed on the fruit of lichen trees, cracking them open with its large, heavy beak. The lichen tree itself also benefits from animals coming near it, as they may burst its spore sacs, allowing it to reproduce. The lichen tree also has a close symbiotic relationship with the slithersucker, a giant predatory slime mold. The slithersucker makes its home in the hollow algal core of the lichen tree, creeping out to drape itself over a branch at certain times of the day to catch prey. If the slithersucker does catch something, parts of the animal will inevitably drop to the forest floor, providing nutrients for the lichen tree as well as the slithersucker. At certain times of day, it oozes along a branch and dangles strands of itself below, forming a sticky curtain. A passing forest flish is easily trapped in the slithersucker's slimy net. Once the flish has been caught, the slithersucker slides off the branch and crashes to the forest floor. There, it secretes a digestive acid which slowly dissolves the helpless forest flish. The slithersucker is a form of giant predatory slime mold native to the northern forest of Pangaea II in 200 million AD. Slime molds, communities of microbes that come together to form a single, coordinated organism, do not grow very large in the human era, and feed mainly on microorganisms which are invisible to the naked eye. Because of their nature, the slime molds survived the 100 million AD mass extinction, and, with many niches of life left uninhabited, quickly became larger and more organized. The slithersucker is composed of millions of microbes which are acting as a single organism. Because of this, it is capable of changing its shape with ease, can split into multiple parts, and can survive practically anything. It is also capable of dissolving the tissue of animals. However, its movement is very slow, and it cannot travel any significant distances by itself. Slithersuckers live in the hollow cores of lichen trees, coming out at certain times of the day to drape itself over the branches, waiting for prey such as insects or forest flish to fly into its trap. Once it has caught an animal, it slides off the branch and crashes onto the forest floor, where it dissolves and eats its prey. Larger animals may take several days to be dissolved. The slithersucker has a symbiotic relationship with lichen trees. It lives inside the hollow, algal core of the lichen, emerging through the organism's porous skin at certain times of the day to catch unsuspecting flish. Any parts of the flish that are undigested will fall to the ground and be absorbed as nutrients by the lichen, therefore benefiting both organisms. As it is too slow to move significant distances by itself, the slithersucker utilizes megasquid to disperse its microbes throughout the forest. allowing it to multiply. It changes into the shape of a lichen tree pod, which are fed upon by megasquid, and is digested. Microbes then migrate across T. He megasquid's body, effectively taking control of it, and forcing it to sneeze out the slithersucker into another part of the forest. In the gloom of the tangled branches and trailing curtains of the lichen trees, bright little jewels flit about. They are as brightly colored as butterflies, but they dart like wrens and hum like hummingbirds. The forest flish is a species of small, insectivorous flish native to the northern forest of Pangaea II in 200 million AD. It is the smallest species of flish in the northern forest. More specialized cousins of ocean flish, the forest flish has evolved the capacity to abandon the sea altogether, instead being highly adapted to a rainforest environment. Like the ocean flish, its fins have evolved into wings. The posterior fins have become hook-like feet which enable the flish to roost. The forest flish evolved to take the place of forest birds like hummingbirds, which were all wiped out by the 100 million AD mass extinction. The gill of the forest flish has evolved into several parts. Part of the exterior gill has become an ear, whilst the gill arches in the throat are now capable of producing sound. The rest of the gill has evolved into a membrane to amplify the chirping created by the arches. The green and blue scaled forest flish is smaller, more compact, and more lightly built than its maritime cousin. Its pectoral wings are smaller, similar in structure to those of a butterfly, and are capable of flapping far faster, up to 30 beats a second. The forest flish's pelvic fins have evolved into small hooks, enabling them to roost from the branches of trees. With wings capable of beating up to 30 times per second, the forest flish is agile enough to hover in the air and catch the small flying insects populating the lichen forest. It tends to travel and roost in small groups. The forest flish communicates by making chirping noises using the gill arches in its throat. Its call more closely resembles the shrill grating of a grasshopper than the fluid notes of a bird. Like bats, they roost upside down, hanging from branches. The forest flish occupies the niche of a common insectivorous forest bird, such as a hummingbird. The flish sometimes uses lichen trees for roosting. The slithersucker relies on the flish for food, and in turn the lichen tree relies on it for fertilization. Squibbons are agile enough to occasionally catch and eat forest flish. While the ability to operate tools and act communally reflects an intelligence ideally suited to life in the northern forest, it may be that a changing environment will encourage the development of even greater sophistication. Perhaps a reasoning type of intelligence will evolve once again. The squibbon is a species of highly intelligent, arboreal pterosquid native to the northern forest of Pangaea II in 200 million AD. As the most human-like animals on Earth since the human era 200 million years previously, squibbons may develop human-like culture and society in the far future, and presumably evolves to dominate the planet just as humans did. In the wake of the 100 million AD mass extinction, the pterosquids evolved to take advantage of the niches left empty by many animals. The squibbon fills the niches of brachiating animals and small, swift arboreal hunters. In the future, squibbons may evolve greater intelligence, and perhaps even a civilization. They are already capable of using tools and even weapons, and are highly intelligent, so it is possible that a change in the squibbon's environment may lead to it developing even further. Squibbons more closely resemble their marine ancestors than the megasquid, both in size and in body plan. Their torso is small and vaguely oval-shaped, and, as with regular squid, they have 8 long, flexible legs and 2 pairs of smaller tentacles. These 2 tentacles are equipped with highly developed suckers or suction cups, which form highly flexible finger-like or pincer-like protuberances. Their eyes are set on muscular, flexible stalks. Squibbons are the most agile of the pterosquids, and, with no skeleton to hinder their movement, are far more effective swingers than human-era animals such as gibbons. Unlike gibbons, they do not brachiate, swinging one arm after the other. Instead, they loop end over end in a continuous somersaulting action, keeping their stalked eyes level with the body's center of gravity as they do so, ensuring they are always looking towards the next branch. Their large brains and sharp vision enables them to navigate the forest canopy at high speeds. Highly social animals, squibbons live in family communes and build simple, nest-like structures in the uppermost stories of the forest. They are the most intelligent animals of 200 million AD. with complex and close family bonds and social structures. Like humans before them, squibbons are capable of using tools. Young squibbons learn by playing, and the colony is quite capable of working together as a whole community. Squibbons are omnivorous and feed mainly on plants, fruits, and lichen pods, but they may also eat small animals which they catch with their tentacles. Young squibbons sharpen their senses and coordination by chasing other animals. The suction cups on a squibbon's tentacles form finger-like protuberances which are so flexible that a squibbon can manipulate small objects and even use simple tools. They have even developed the use of weapons to some degree, as they will sometimes brandish branches as clubs, and use fruits and lichen pods as thrown projectiles. Omnivores, squibbons will eat both small animals such as forest flesh, and fruits like those of the lichen tree, in which they may also build nests. Chasing animals such as flesh can sharpen the senses and coordination of squibbons. Careless squibbons may end up caught by similarly omnivorous megasquid, but the colony will always defend their own by harassing the megasquid with fruits and spore polyps, or swinging down and rescuing the endangered squibbon. They may also fall prey to slithersuckers. Heavier than an elephant and almost as tall, the megasquid pushes its way through the soaking vegetation, splintering conifer trunks and pulping the branches of lichen trees as it goes. The megasquid is an elephant-sized species of pterosquid native to the northern forest of Pangaea II in 200 million AD. It is the largest land animal of its time. The cephalopods have been slowly adapting for life on dry land since 100 million AD, with the large Bengali swampus octopus. However, they only truly began to evolve and diversify after the 100 million AD mass extinction, which wiped out most large life forms on Earth. With many empty ecological niches, it was the squid, not the octopuses, which evolved to be the dominant animals. The megasquid in particular appears to have evolved because of the lack of large land animals like the swampus. The early pterosquids dragged themselves across the land, but the megasquid's ancestor eventually developed legs. The megasquid is 4 meters tall and weighs 8 tons. Physically, it appears to be very different to regular squid, however, save for a few differences, they are very similar to a squid but tilted vertically. The main body is the most like that of a squid with a large mantle and small eyes. This mantle is porous as air can flow through it to reach the lungs and keep the animal alive. The small brain is located just behind the eyes. However, everything below the mantle is strange and foreign. Its 8 limbs have evolved into 1/3 of a meter thick column-like legs reminiscent of elephant or sauropod legs. These legs are composed entirely of circular vertical rings of muscle. In addition, it has 2 tentacles at the front of its body which are used as arms picking up and manipulating food. Unlike the highly evolved legs, these tentacles are similar to the tentacles of a modern-day squid. Set in the very center of this network of legs is the megasquid's beak-like mouth. The anus would appear to be at the back of the animal just under the mantle, and the location of the reproductive organs is unknown. On the front center of the mantle above the megasquid's face is a large blue vocal sac. The megasquid uses these sacs to generate deep booming calls for communication. The megasquid's entire digestive and respiratory systems seem blended together. They breathe through their vocal sac, which is connected to the anus, suggesting that the stomach is in the same tract as the lungs. The sacs also act as a nasal passage. The skin of a megasquid is not what one would expect from a squid. It is tough and rhinoceros-like. The skin of a megasquid is generally brown with lighter stripes on some individuals to keep itself from drying out. 0.2s greater than the skin of megasquid secretes some kind of liquid. The megasquid is a slow, omnivorous animal. It will eat anything that presents itself, from lichen tree capsules, squibbon, and disguised slithersuckers. The tree capsules are commonly targeted because of their bright color. Megasquids have excellent color vision. Megasquid locomotion is difficult. They are very slow, and have a very specific way of walking. The front and back right legs are moved forward with the middle left legs, and then the same the other way around. If megasquid moved in any other way, they would overbalance or trip over themselves. Megasquid can live up to a maximum of 50 years. At least partially thanks to the lack of large land predators on Pangaea II. Megasquid communicate with each other via large blue vocal sacs on the forehead area of their mantles. They produce different sounds, from low grumbling or humming to a loud boom. The sounds are made when a megasquid breathes in a certain way. Megasquid use their anterior arm tentacles as hands, grabbing food with them, and generally using them as tools for tasks such as moving obstacles. Megasquid are used by slithersuckers as a method of dispersal. The slithersucker tricks the megasquid into eating it, and then takes control of the giant squid's central nervous system by inflaming its brain, and causes it to sneeze, sending bits of the slithersucker around the forest. This is not harmful to the megasquid. Megasquid also eat squibbons. However, occasionally the tables are turned somewhat, and squibbons will taunt passing megasquid from the trees, throwing things at them and swinging around. The global ocean is a superocean from 200 million AD that surrounds the new supercontinent of Nova Pangaea. The mass extinction of 100 million AD did not just ravage life on land. Life in the oceans was profoundly affected. 2. Active volcanoes filled the sky with ash and dust, cutting out the sunlight for months on end. Acid rain, formed by sulfur compounds belched out by volcanoes, fell continuously into the sea. The lack of sunlight and the increase of acidity killed off the plankton in the surface waters and led to a catastrophic collapse in the oceanic food chain. Most bony fish suddenly died away, as did countless other marine creatures. Where once the oceans had teemed with life, they became almost barren. But nature does not leave ecological niches vacant for long. The animals that survived the mass extinction did so because they took shelter in the deepest, most remote refuges of the ocean. Once conditions had stabilized, bony fish were mostly replaced by completely new forms of life. It is now 200 million AD. The planet is dominated by a single, giant landmass called Nova Pangaea. One continent means one ocean, the global ocean, a body of water so vast that its center lies 16,000 kilometers from the nearest coast. This uninterrupted expanse of water helps to determine the extreme weather conditions of the planet. The intense heating of the atmosphere at the equator draws in trade winds from the north and south. These converge and blow westwards along the equator, driving permanent ocean currents before them. The result is a constant equatorial gyre, an immense circulatory current that involves the whole ocean. The global current makes it easy for sea life to migrate, and so the global ocean is populated by very cosmopolitan groups of animals. As the predominant ocean currents run east to west, there is little water movement between north and south. The cold waters of the South Pole do not mix with the warm waters of the equator. The result is a steep temperature gradient between high and low latitudes. However, worldwide temperatures are still too high for there to be a polar ice cap. This single ocean is a complex environment supporting intricate food chains and highly evolved species, quite unlike anything known from the reign of humanity. Why? Sometimes brewing over the global ocean are extreme hurricanes called hypercanes, 50% stronger than previous hurricanes with winds gusting at 400 km per hour. The reason for this is because since a supercontinent is always surrounded by a superocean, the energy balance of the globe changes. There is a lot more energy. A much warmer ocean, much more energy is transferred into the atmosphere, creating more powerful storms. This species of silver swimmer roams the ocean in shoals. A complex array of antennae and bristles at the front of the animal enables it to filter out fine particles of plankton from the water and sweep them into its mouth. The common silver swimmer is a species of social filter-feeding silver swimmer native to the global ocean of 200 million AD. It is the most common silver swimmer species, and the most abundant animal of the global ocean. Silver swimmers have descended from marine crustaceans which developed neoteny, the ability to reproduce in a larval stage, in the immediate aftermath of the 100 million AD mass extinction. With the oceans almost completely free of fish, they quickly branched out to fill almost all the marine niches. The common silver swimmer specifically fills the niche of fish, and of filter-feeding animals. The common silver swimmer has a large and armored, yet lightweight head, bristly legs on its underside, and a segmented tail which drives it through the water with an up and down motion. A complex array of antennae and bristles hanging around its mouthparts enables the animal to filter out fine particles of plankton from the water, then sweep them into its mouth. Common silver swimmers roam the ocean in large shoals. As a very common and relatively small animal, the common silver swimmer is a primary food source for several species of ocean fish. One species has even evolved to follow migrating shoals of silver swimmers right across the global ocean. It is also a minor prey item for sharkopaths. Ocean fish have filled the niches left behind by the extinction of birds and have taken to the air in true flight. They have sharp teeth on powerful protocyle jaws which snap out to pluck prey from the water. The ocean fish is a species of maritime fish living around the coasts of Pangaea II and the global ocean in 200 million AD. The ocean fish has a similar lifestyle to modern-day seagulls and other coastal fishing birds. But since the majority of marine fish are extinct in 200 million AD, the fish feeds on silver swimmers. There are a number of closely related species of ocean fish, including a grebe-like species, a tern-like species, an albatross-like species, an avocet-like species, a skua-like species, and a cormorant-like species. The ocean fish appears to be the oldest and most basal of the fish species, as it resembles its cod ancestors more closely than any of the other fish species. It evolved to fill the niche left by extinct seabirds like seagulls and petrels. Closely related species soon diverged to fill other niches. The grebe fish evolved as a filter feeder, the albatross fish evolved as a migratory hunter, and the skua fish evolved as a scavenger. Unlike its cousins on dry land, the ocean fish has retained the general physical form of a cod, with large dorsal, anal, and ventral fins, which appear to be useless, simply remnants of the fish's former in the water. The ocean fish's large caudal fin is rotated 90 degrees, resembling a whale's fluke. This makeshift tail is used for takeoff prior to flight. A single powerful thrust of its tail can lift a floating ocean fish clear of the surface, allowing the first sweep of its flying fins to get it airborne immediately. The lateral spread of the caudal fin also provides a control surface, allowing the fish to steer and maneuver while in flight. The ocean fish's primary jaw has evolved to resemble the bill of a bird, with blue and red stripes. However, inside the fish's mouth there is a second set of pharyngeal jaws containing teeth. This set of jaws is larger, raw and red, and can be directed to either the left or the right, improving the fish's ability to pluck prey from the water. In order to float on the surface of the water, ocean fish store air in the lungs, have fat reserves around their chest, and are covered in waterproof, insulating scales. Their flying fins can stretch over their backs like sails and their pelvic fins reach into the sea like a keel, steadying the animals as they float. Ocean fish are social animals which hunt in small groups circling the ocean and searching for prey before swooping down and grabbing their food with their pharyngeal jaws. When they need to rest during flight, they land on the surface of the ocean and float there, buoyed by the air in their lungs and their fat reserves. However, ocean fish go to the sea only to hunt. At dusk the flocks return to roost on the rocky outcrops of coastal cliff face where they nest. Different subspecies of ocean fish occupied every different ecological niche. For a coastal flying animal, the most common species played the role of a basic seabirdsfish as a seagull flying around the coast in flocks and occasionally diving down to catch silver swimmers. All species of ocean fish are preyed on by the rainbow squid. However, perhaps the ocean fish's most important ecological role is in the rainshadow desert on the other side of the Pangaea II coastal mountain range. Ocean fish, along with other marine animals, are cast over the mountains during regular hurricanes and tropical storms. Their bodies, known as fishrecs, are the only food sources for carnivorous animals in the desert, and the bumblebeetle requires a fish carcass for reproduction. Without the ocean fish, the entire ecosystem of this rainshadow desert would collapse. The global ocean is patrolled by loose groupings of sharkopaths covering a large expanse of water. If one happens upon a prey animal, it sets off a flashing sequence in bioluminescent patches along its side. This visual signal penetrates the water and can be picked up by the sharkopath's closet neighbor. The neighbor repeats the signaling process, and soon the whole group of sharkopaths is aware of the presence of food and starts to home in on its quarry. The sharkopath is a species of pack-hunting bioluminescent kitefin shark native to the global ocean of 200 million AD. They are the apex predators of the global ocean. The sharkopath evolved from a kind of kitefin shark which survived the mass extinction like the already bioluminescent spined pygmy shark. The sharks survived the 100 million AD mass extinction just as they had survived several previous mass extinctions, but the formation of Pangaea II and the global ocean presented them with some problems with a single Reek time equals 0.2s greater than vast ocean. Prey is now widely dispersed with large stretches of empty water between prey items, and a single shark hunting randomly would be unlikely to come across enough prey to sustain it because of this. Own group of sharks evolved to become pack hunters, developing bioluminescence in order to better communicate with one another. The simple primitive design of the shark has proved itself extremely effective, and the sharkopath's biology is almost no different to that of its human-era ancestors. One of its few new features is a series of bioluminescent patches running along its sides, creating a light which penetrates the water and can be picked up by a sharkopath's closest neighbor. This bioluminescence is controlled by the sharkopath's brain. Human-era sharks had highly evolved sensory organs, thousands of small pits in their heads which detected water pressure changes and electric discharges, and cells in their nasal passages which picked up traces of prey. The sharkopath retains all of these sensory organs and has even improved upon them. The ridges on its head contain organs which sense the slightest trace of scent. Sharkopaths are pack-hunting animals which patrol to the ocean in loose groupings. When a sharkopath detects prey, it begins to flash the luminescent patches on its sides, alerting its neighbors that prey is nearby. As the scent becomes stronger, the flashing becomes more and more rapid. Sharkopaths are generalist predators and will hunt most marine animals, including silver swimmers, but often work together to hunt the enormous rainbow squid which congregate in the shallow waters off Pangaea II's southern peninsula during the breeding season. Although rainbow squids can camouflage themselves, sharkopaths can still detect their presence by using their sensory organs, which pick up on the electrical discharge from the rainbow squid's nervous system. Sometimes several flocks of ocean fish will gather above one whirling silver swimmer shoal. Suddenly a rainbow squid tentacle will snap from the water surface, seizing a fish, and disappears. The shoal then vanishes as well, and in its place appears a broader shape. The back of the enormous animal drifting just below the surface part of the shoal is not a shoal at all. 2's greater than, but the changing pattern on the skin of this beast. The rainbow squid is a species of highly intelligent predatory squid native to the global ocean of 200 million AD. With a body the size of a finback whale and tentacles of a similar length, the rainbow squid is by far the biggest animal in the global ocean. The rainbow squid is a very large animal, with a body 20 meters long, and tentacles of similar length. Its eyes are about a meter in diameter. It has a very large brain, and is highly intelligent, even more so than human-era squid. The rainbow squid's most distinguishing feature is its ability to change color at will by using muscular sacs on the surface of its skin called chromatophores. These can be expanded or contracted at will, producing color changes or flowing patterns over the whole animal. Each chromatophore is part of a complex nervous system and is controlled by a nerve, so the rainbow squid's brain is by necessity immense and very powerful. Some of the chromatophores also contain symbiotic, luminous bacteria, allowing the squid to incorporate light into its displays. Using its chromatophores, the rainbow squid can hide from sight by merging with the green of the ocean, flash up a dramatic light display to scare off potential predators, and produce a flowing pattern of colored patches to mimic the motion of a silver swimmer shoal. Its senses are so acute that it is able to immediately choose the appropriate display for any situation. Human-era cephalopods rarely lived for more than around 2 years, because they died after reproducing. The rainbow squid has finally escaped this live fast die young cycle and, with almost no predators, can live for up to 100 years. Rainbow squids are predatory animals which attract prey by changing their appearance to mimic smaller animals. They are usually solitary animals which range across the ocean, but they gather in large groups around the shallow waters around Pangaea II's southwestern cape once a year to breed. On the night of the full moon on the autumnal equinox, the global ocean's entire population of rainbow squids gathers off the southwestern cape, in shallow waters near seamounts, to compete for a mate. Male rainbow squids put on vivid displays of color and light. The better the display, the more successful the individual is likely to be in hunting, and the more likely to produce equally successful offspring, so the male with the most vivid display is the most likely to mate. Rainbow squids prey on the various species of maritime ocean fish, luring them in close enough to catch by camouflaging themselves as shoals of silver swimmers. To ensure they are not themselves attacked during a hunt, they turn their bottom halves the same color as the sky. It is not known if rainbow squids hunt silver swimmers themselves, but it's unlikely the squid can survive only on fish. Due to their size, rainbow squids have few enemies, but they are preyed on by sharkopaths, pack-hunting sharks. Sharkopaths can see through the camouflage of a rainbow squid by using their sensory organs to detect electrical activity in the squid's nervous system.